After the votes, amendments will be called up in the order of seniority. As agreed to with the ranking member, senators will be permitted to speak on their amendment prior to voting on them. We will begin with opening statements. And I'll say this as well. Obviously, we need to have enough ayes present for us to move forward, so there may be a bit of a lapse in time before we finish the votes. So that is just part of the process of having members on multiple committees who are doing the same thing at the same time. I'll start with my opening statement. Any members who may wish to speak on the bills can do so afterwards. Senators will be permitted to speak on their amendments. We will begin with opening statements. When I became chairman of this committee, I promised that we would return to regular order. Now, for those of you unfamiliar with regular order, as I am, it's been like 7 or 8 years since we've actually had a markup on this committee. So it is ridiculous in one way and frankly remarkable in another way that we are returning to regular order, which is one of the priorities I committed to when becoming chairman. Today's historic markup of the Genius Act and the Firm Act is proof that we are, in fact, delivering on our promises. The digital asset community, and more importantly, the American consumers, deserve clarity. For far too long, the absence of a regulatory framework has left consumers vulnerable and businesses in the dark. This uncertainty has also stifled innovation here at home in America. That changes today. The Genius Act is a bipartisan step forward in ensuring stablecoins are safe and reliable tools in the financial system. The Genius Act establishes common sense rules that require stablecoin issuers to maintain reserves backed one-to-one, comply with anti-money laundering laws, and ultimately protect American consumers while promoting the U.S. dollar's strength in the global economy. This is about keeping innovation and opportunity on American soil rather than driving it overseas. We are also taking an action today to end the weaponization of financial regulators. The Firm Act will eliminate the ability of regulators to use reputational risk as a justification to debank legal operating businesses and individuals. No federal agency should have the power to cut off access to our financial services industry simply because they disapprove of a customer's politics, business, or industry. That is simply un-American. This bill ensures that banks make decisions based on financial risk, not political preference. While the Firm Act is the first step, there are other bills, really good bills, that address debanking, including Senator Kramer's Fair Access to Banking Act. As a committee, we will commit to working on this issue and figuring out the best way to solve it long term. With today's markup, we are advancing serious bipartisan solutions. I look forward to working with my colleagues to get these bills to the Senate floor and ultimately to President Trump's desk. Finally, I want to take a second to thank both Senators Hagerty and Lummis for working together on such an important work as the Genius Act. And I'd like to thank your staffs as well. This has been a very, very important process, and the success that we've had comes from a bipartisan coalition that includes Senator also Brooks as a co-sponsor of the legislation, working together, not as Republicans or Democrats, but working together as Americans, protecting innovation in the greatest nation on the planet. And if we are going to have economic supremacy in the world, it requires for us to encourage, frankly, innovation before we stifle it with too much oppressive regulation. I turn to our ranking member, Senator Warren.
Thank you, Mr. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Many of us are prepared to support a sensible stablecoin bill. We could see a bill get a wide majority of votes if it protects consumers, if it protects our national security, and if it protects our nation's financial stability. But this bill, in its current form, doesn't do any of that. First, the bill ignores basic consumer protections that apply to every other financial product available in America. If you are sending a US dollar from your PayPal wallet and you get scammed, the CFPB has the authority right now to help you get your money back. But if this bill passes and you're sending a stable coin from your PayPal wallet and you get scammed, you may just be out of luck. In fact, the bill even invites scammers into the market by refusing to prohibit people convicted of fraud and money laundering from owning stablecoin companies. Sam Bankman-Fried could buy a stablecoin company from prison, and regulators would have no legal grounds to stop him under this bill. We need to fix that, and I don't understand why there would be anyone, Democrat or Republican, who wouldn't want to do that. Second, the bill lacks basic national security protections that, again, apply to every other type of financial transaction in America. Without changes, this bill will supercharge the financing of terrorism. It will make sanctions evasion by Iran, North Korea, and Russia easier, and it will help out international gangs that are moving fentanyl into the United States. It even provides a boost for the sale of child pornography. Last week, an industry report called stablecoins, quote, the new kingpin of illicit crypto activity. Let me give one example. The bill does not authorize the United States to enforce our existing sanctions when North Korea or Iran buy nuclear materials using dollar-backed stablecoins instead of dollars. We need to fix that, and I don't understand why there would be anyone, Democrat or Republican, who wouldn't want to do that. Third, the bill lacks basic safeguards necessary to ensure that stablecoins don't blow up our entire financial system. Under this bill, stablecoin issuers can invest in risky assets, including the very assets that were bailed out in 2008 and again in 2020. And anyone who thinks the U.S. taxpayer won't be called on, directly or indirectly, to bail out these guys is kidding themselves. Circle, one of the largest stablecoin companies in the world, would have blown up in 2023 if regulators hadn't bailed out its $3.3 billion of deposits at Silicon Valley Bank. This bill begs for more bailouts. We need to fix that, and I don't understand why there would be anyone, Democrat or Republican, who wouldn't want to do that. Finally, this bill does something that Democrats and Republicans have usually linked arms to stop throughout history. It lets a giant commercial company create its own currency, giving it the massive economic power that is usually reserved for publicly chartered banks. This means that this bill gives Elon Musk the chance to issue his own X-money currency, monetize our most sensitive transactions data, punish people who speak out against him by choking off their access to the payment system, use his currency to undercut the US dollar, and destabilize our financial system when it all goes bust. This bill opens the door for the richest man in the world to build a global empire that could begin to supplant the functions of the U.S. government. And we really need to fix that. I don't understand why there would be anyone, Democrat or Republican, who wouldn't want to do that. Not one of the fixes that we're talking about here would end stablecoins. Not one of the fixes would restrain innovation. Not one of these fixes would be hard to put in place, because not a single one of these gaps in the bill is necessary to create a reasonable federal regulatory regime for stablecoins. Several of them have been included in earlier bipartisan stablecoin proposals introduced in Congress. and each can be addressed by adopting straightforward amendments that apply the same basic rules in the stablecoin market as we have for every other financial product. Let me be direct. We all know that there are stablecoin issuers making money off facilitating crime and funding Iran and North Korea. We know there are stablecoin issuers making money off cheating consumers. And we're pretty sure that Elon Musk would love to issue his own currency to compete with the US dollar. But we were not sent here to work for North Korea or Iran or Elon Musk or a bunch of scammers. Innovative blockchain companies that want regulatory certainty and a vibrant and innovative marketplace deserve better than we're giving them in this bill, and so do the American people. If we can find compromises on these issues today, I'm prepared to support this bill. If not, I will work to defeat it, because we are not going to get a second chance to do this right. And we will all have to live with the consequences of what we do here today. This committee will also be considering the FIRM Act during today's session. I have deep concerns about this bill as well. I am glad that Republicans and Democrats agree that Congress should be taking steps to address debanking, and I had hoped, Mr. Chairman, that we could have worked together on meaningful legislation to do that. However, the bill we see today would hamstring regulators in their efforts to preserve the safety and soundness of our banking system without addressing the underlying causes of debanking. Republicans and Democrats need to work together to stop unfair customer account closures, but this bill isn't it. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Just be clear on these opening statements are supposed to be about 2 minutes or less. So please stick with that. Senator Hagerty, you are recognized.
Thank you, Chairman Scott, and I want to thank you for your leadership in bringing this legislation to the floor. As the world modernizes its payment systems, the United States can't be left behind. Stablecoins can actually play a pivotal role in spurring modernization, whether it's improving transaction efficiency, freeing up working capital, or driving U.S. Treasury demand. The benefits of a clear regulatory framework for stablecoin are immense. I want to acknowledge the hard work of my colleagues on both sides of the aisle who've worked tirelessly on this bill and have consulted with countless industry participants, academic experts, and government stakeholders to put together a truly bipartisan effort. And I want to underscore that the current draft is, in the manager's package that's associated with it that we're going to vote on today, will address the many claims that were lodged by the ranking member today, and they will clarify the fact that many of the claims simply just aren't applicable here. The Genius Act has gained this bipartisan support because it presents common sense rules that protect consumers, promote competition, and foster innovation. It's time we provide the clarity and stability that our country and its innovators so desperately need. Before I conclude, I'd just like to note that Senator Brooks has also raised an adjustment to ensure the proper technical application of consumer protection laws. There are no loopholes created in this bill, and if there are any technical fixes necessary, I look forward to working with Senator Brooks and my colleagues on this committee to address them. I also want to just finally say thank you to my staff, Luke Pettit, John DeGravio, Matt Benoit, and Ethan Finley, to the Banking Committee staff, and to the personal staffs of all of my colleagues here who've worked so hard on this bill. Thanks to all of you very much.
Senator Lummis is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm proud to join you and join Senator Hagerty and Senator Gillibrand and Senator Brooks in bringing the Genius Act and the FIRM Act to a markup today. And I'm really proud of the product that we have before the committee. It's the product of years of policy development and negotiations that were started in 2022 by Senator Hagerty, Senator Gillibrand, Senator Toomey, and myself, and it continues through this process today. This bill promotes responsible financial innovation and protects consumers. It's that simple. This bill also strengthens the dual banking system by creating a strong pathway for both state and federal stablecoin issuers to operate on a level playing field under robust supervision. Wyoming pioneered digital asset legislation in 2018, and I'm proud to say this bill builds upon my state's hard work and success and framework that creates a very fair but highly transparent and regulated process. I look forward to continuing to work with members on a bipartisan basis to improve the bill as it moves along. I want to assure everybody that Machiavelli is not going to get raised from the dead to issue stablecoins so we can destroy our planet with drugs. I mean, this is ridiculous. This is an innovative, important financial product that has safeguards built into the bill. I strongly support it and encourage all to do so. And I, too, want to thank my staff, Chris Land, Connor Brown, and many others who've been working on this bill for years. And Senator Haggerty, thank you. Working with your staff and Senator Gillibrand's staff has been delightful. I yield back.
Thank you. Senator Brooks.
Thank you so much, Chair Scott, Ranking Member Warren, for your leadership. I am proud of the bipartisan work that Senators Haggerty, Gillibrand, and Lummis and I have been able to accomplish with this piece of legislation, the Genius Act. It is critical that as we address emerging markets, we do so in a way that protects consumers, that drives innovation, and that allows everyone to participate in and benefit from these markets, and that also prioritizes American leadership. I believe that our bill provides an important foundational framework from which to build, and that today we have an opportunity to make positive changes toward our common goal. We've heard some concerns that our revisions to the state preemption language may have unintended consequences, and I'd like to thank Senators Haggerty and Lummis for their commitment to work with us to address these concerns and to do so on the floor. I look forward to working with both Chairman Scott and Ranking Member Warren, as well as my esteemed colleagues on this committee, as we consider a number of thoughtful amendments today. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Brooks. I now move to call up Senate S919, the Guiding and Establishing National Innovation for U.S. Stablecoins Act. I should stick with Genius Act. Reading is fundamental, but anyways. So are my contacts. I ask unanimous consent that we dispense with the reading of all amendments. Senators will find printed copies in front of them, the text of which has already been made available. Is there an objection? Without objection, so ordered. I move to consideration of the manager's package, Scott Amendment 1. This amendment includes a number of bipartisan provisions, including Amendment number 5 by Senators Lummis and Gallego, which clarifies the treatment of payment stablecoins that are not issued by a permitted issuer. Amendment number 16, Senators Gallego and Crapel, which requires regulators to consider the competence, experience, and integrity of key leaders at an applicant's company. Amendment number 36 by Senators Warnock and Britt, which adds language to prohibit the use of deceptive names by a stablecoin issuer. Amendment number 56 by Senators Rounds and Blunt Rochester, which clarifies the bill's intention to maintain the status quo as it relates to the master account access at the Federal Reserve. Amendment number 65 by Senators Blunt Rochester and Tillis, which gives customers of stablecoins super priority over other creditors in bankruptcy. Amendment number 79 by Senator Warner, a clarification on the stablecoin reserve requirements, as well as some technical edits. I urge all of my colleagues to support this bipartisan amendment. Would anyone like to speak on this amendment for seconds? Seeing no one, there is no other discussion on the amendment. Then I ask that the amendment be adopted by voice vote. All in favor say aye.
Aye. Aye.
All opposed? The ayes have it, and the amendment is agreed to. I now call up Warren Amendment number 61. Senator Warren, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So throughout history, our country's maintained a separation between our system of money and payments on the one side and actual business, commerce, the real economy on the other side. This protects the financial system, it promotes competition, it prevents concentrating too much economic power in the hands of a few giants. Democrats and Republicans have time and time again linked arms to defend this separation. It is under threat now, and Democrats and Republicans should once again come together to preserve it. Under this bill, big tech billionaires like Elon Musk and Mark Zuckerberg and Jeff Bezos could effectively issue their own currencies that compete with the US dollar. Why should that bother us? They could monitor our most sensitive transactions data and use it to fuel even more intrusive advertising and surveillance pricing schemes. They could also wield control over their own currencies to censor adversaries and crush competitors. For years, my Republican colleagues have shared their concerns about companies like Facebook censoring conservative voices and engaging in election interference. Just imagine if these companies are issuing their own currencies. In fact, many of my Republican colleagues did express concern in this very hearing room in 2019 when a Facebook executive testified about the proposed Libra stablecoin project. Senator Kennedy may have said it best when he said, Facebook now wants to control the money supply. What could possibly go wrong? If a big tech company fails, it could force the largest bailout in U.S. history. If it threatened to tear down the payment systems used by billions of people around the world. But my most pressing concern is Elon Musk's attempt to build an empire that rivals the power of most nation states. He has declared his ambition to launch X money. It turns out that's not easy to do. It's tough to build a new currency right now. There are a lot of laws in place to protect consumers if he does it through current law. That is why he is trying to dismantle the CFPB. This is a bill that will give him an open door to be able to issue those Musk money coins all on his own and his own money. I strongly recommend that this committee vote against it.
Senator Warren, thank you. I urge my colleagues to...
I should say vote in favor of the amendment. Which would vote against it? I didn't say it right. I was trying, I saw the chairman getting itchy.
Yes,
so I just want to say
I was.
my amendment would fix, all it does is put the wall back in place that has always been in place between the commercial side of the House and the banking side of the House.
Thank
it
you,
just
ma'am.
says, puts it back in place.
I really
urge
appreciate
people
that.
to vote yes.
Thank you. I urge my colleagues,
Sorry.
certainly, I urge my colleagues to oppose this amendment. It makes little sense to limit payment stablecoins issuance to just banks. Issuing payment stablecoins is inherently different than banking. First, payment stablecoin issuers are not offering lending or credit products at all. Second, payment stablecoins are backed one-to-one in reserves. Payment stablecoins are just traveler's checks on the blockchain, to make it simple. The traditional concerns underlying banking versus commerce are not present in this framework. The alternative is letting banks dominate the stablecoin space, stifling innovation and allowing no competition in this innovative market. This harms consumers. I urge my colleagues to vote no, and the clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Chairman?
No?
Mr. Crapo? No. Mr. Rounds? No. Mr. Tillis? No. Mr. Kennedy? No. Mr. Haggerty?
No.
Ms. Lemus?
No.
Mrs. Britt? No. Mr. Ricketts?
No by proxy?
Mr. Banks? No. Mr. Kramer? No. Mr. Moreno? No. Mr. McCormick? No. Ms. Warren?
Yes.
Mr. Reed?
Yes.
Mr. Warner?
Yes.
Mr. Van Hollen? Yes. Ms. Cortez Masto?
Yes.
Ms. Smith?
Yes.
Mr. Warnock?
Yes.
Mr. Kim?
Yes.
Mr. Gallego?
Yes.
Ms. Blunt Rochester?
Yes.
Ms. Also Brooks?
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, the vote is 13 opposed, 11 in favor.
The amendment is not agreed to. We will now call up Warren Amendment 74. I now recognize Senator Warren for 2 minutes.
Thank you. I will do my best.
Yes, ma'am. I'll start clicking and clacking.
No, there we go. So this is Amendment 74.
Yes, ma'am.
Wait a minute. I've got Amendment 76. Forgive me here. Okay, let me just go ahead and do this. I think this is Amendment 76. I apologize, Mr. Chairman. So this is one I can't understand why my Republican colleagues would vote against. This is a check to make sure we're not licensing stablecoin issuers that threaten our national security. I want to drill down on one particular threat. Here we go. I want to make sure that we protect national security when we have stablecoins bills. We've got to make sure this bill does this. It's been widely reported that terrorists, drug traffickers, money launderers, people trying to evade sanctions are using cryptocurrency to facilitate their illicit activities. It is especially true with stablecoins. In recent days, many members of this committee have reviewed classified analysis of the scope of the problem. The industry itself now describes stablecoins as saying they account for more than 60% of all illicit activity in crypto. People in the industry are now describing stablecoins as the kingpin of illicit crypto activity. A well-regulated stablecoin regime could help fix this problem. This bill doesn't do that. It makes the problem worse because it makes it easier to use these tokens. Let me be clear. This legislation poses a clear threat to our national security if we don't just put basic safeguards in place. Terrorists, fentanyl traffickers, Iran, North Korea, Russia, child pornographers, all of these adversaries are using stablecoins and will continue to use them. This basic fix should be non-controversial. Regulators should be required at least to look to make sure stablecoin issuers don't have a history of facilitating sanctions evasion, drug traffickers moving fentanyl into our streets, funding weapons programs to North Korea or Iran, or making it easier to distribute child pornography. If they pose that kind of risk, they shouldn't be able to get a license. That's all this bill is about: deny licenses to people who have histories in those areas. I urge a yes vote.
Is there a rebuttal?
Mr. Chairman,
Senator Haggerty?
I urge my colleagues to oppose this amendment. I'm going to talk about it in two areas that the ranking member brought up. First, on the classified information that was raised and the issues regarding national security. A classified binder has also been produced, thank you, Mr. Chairman, that demonstrates the need for Genius to go into law so that we can actually disrupt criminal networks. An expansion of the dollar internationally actually affords us new opportunities to disrupt the financing of bad actors. The Genius Act enhances national security by regulating and registering payment stablecoins issuers and ensuring that they comply with law enforcement. The Genius Act will also allow the dollar to grow internationally. That generates long-term demand for U.S. Treasuries, and it's critical for digital technical advancement that we remain a leader in this space. We should lead around the globe. Also, I want to talk to the anti-money laundering provisions. The Genius Act has actually been updated to put more fundamental AML requirements in, classifying payment stablecoin issuers as financial institutions under the Bank Secrecy Act, subjecting them to AML program requirements that include suspicious activity reporting. It mandates that stablecoin issuers maintain the technical ability to freeze and burn wallets that will allow them to ensure compliance with lawful orders, and directs the Financial Crimes Enforcement Network to adopt rules implementing the BSA and AML requirements for payment stablecoins issuers. It actually strengthens Treasury's ability to coordinate sanctions enforcement. I urge my colleagues to vote against this amendment.
All right, the clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Chairman,
No?
Mr. Crapo,
No by proxy?
Mr. Rounds,
No by proxy?
Mr. Tillis, Mr. Kennedy,
No by proxy?
Mr. Haggerty,
No.
Ms. Lummis, Mrs. Britt,
No by proxy?
Mr. Ricketts,
No by proxy?
Mr. Banks, Mr. Kramer, Mr. Moreno,
No.
Mr. McCormick, Ms. Warren,
Yes.
Mr. Reed, Mr. Warner, Mr. Van Hollen, Ms. Cortez Masto, Ms. Smith, Mr. Warnock, Mr. Kim, Mr. Gallego, Ms. Blunt Rochester, Ms. Also Brooks. Mr. Chairman, the votes are 13 opposed and 11 in favor.
This amendment is not agreed to. I call up Warren 76. Senator Warren?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I just want to remind everyone what the previous one was about is just who gets access to these things, who gets to issue them, and looking into the backgrounds of the people who do it. So if you're a drug trafficker, you probably shouldn't be able to do this. I can't understand why my Republican colleagues would vote against that, but that's where we are. So I want to drill down on one particular threat. As every member of this committee knows, drug overdose deaths have devastated communities across the country in recent years. Republicans and Democrats agree it is a crisis. We work together to address it. So let me see if we can just agree on a narrow fix to improve the bill, at least to make it sure that it doesn't make it easier for cartels to get fentanyl and other drugs into our communities. This amendment would require regulators to make sure that stablecoin issuers don't have a history of facilitating fentanyl and other drug trafficking, and to revoke a license if they're found to engage in that activity or other financial crimes. Every member of the committee should vote for this amendment. Without it, the committee is basically saying drug trafficking using stablecoins is just not my problem. If this bill puts more money and makes it easier for fentanyl traffickers to be able to move the money around so they can get more fentanyl into our communities, that's a problem. We can stitch that loophole up. It's highly specific, and the only people we're hurting here are the fentanyl traffickers. I urge a yes vote.
Is there a rebuttal?
Mr. Chairman,
Senator Haggerty?
for many of the reasons that I mentioned in our last exchange, I encourage my colleagues to oppose this amendment. Senator Kem's amendment that we have discussed, I look forward to working with him on the floor to address some of the concerns that were raised here. In every respect, the Genius Act actually updates and includes more fulsome anti-money laundering requirements, increases law enforcement's capacity to deal with problems, and I encourage, again, my colleagues to oppose this amendment. Thank you.
The clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Chairman.
No?
Mr. Crapo. Mr. Rounds.
No by proxy?
Mr. Tillis. Mr. Kennedy.
No by proxy?
Mr. Haggerty.
No.
Ms. Lemus. Mrs. Britt.
No by proxy?
Mr. Ricketts.
No by proxy?
Mr. Banks. Mr. Kramer. No. Mr. Moreno.
No.
Mr. McCormick.
No by proxy?
Ms. Warren.
Yes.
Mr. Reed. Mr. Warner. Mr. Van Hollen. Ms. Cortez Masto. Ms. Smith. Mr. Warnock. Mr. Kim. Mr. Gallego. Ms. Blunt Rochester. Ms. Also Brooks. Mr. Chairman, the vote is 13 opposed and 11 in favor.
The amendment is not agreed to. I call up Warren Amendment 78.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to try one more time. I understand, as Senator Haggerty says, there are some anti-money laundering provisions here. Part of the point of a markup is to put up the other possibilities where there may be things that aren't yet covered. I know every one of us on this committee opposes the spread of child pornography. According to one of the leading nonprofits working to eliminate child porn online, crypto is, quote, the dominant choice for buyers and sellers of commercial child sexual abuse content. Putting aside terrorist funding, North Korea and Iran, and drug trafficking, my Republican colleagues have already voted against requiring regulators just to make sure they're not licensing stablecoin issuers that contribute to those national security risks. We should at least be able to agree on checking whether an issuer has a history or poses a risk of facilitating the transfer of child pornography. Surely we agree on keeping our children safe and making certain that we are not facilitating sexual abuse. This amendment would just make the regulators check for that kind of risk and require them to pull a license if an issuer is found to have engaged in facilitating the proliferation of child sexual abuse content. The current bill does not permit that. Without it, the committee would be saying that child pornography is not my problem if it puts more money into the hands of these child pornographers. Again, this is just a common sense amendment and says we have some generic provisions on anti-money laundering, but can we at least look at the people who are issuing these coins and try to keep the child pornographers out? Thank you, I urge a yes vote.
Mr. Chairman,
Senator Haggerty?
I want to thank the ranking member for her concerns, but I'm going to encourage my colleagues to oppose this amendment. The Genius Act actually addresses the concerns underlying the amendment raised by Senator Warren. The bill requires regulators to consider the integrity of the officers and directors, among others, when considering applications for permitted payment stablecoin licenses. The bill also allows regulators to establish additional factors that can also be considered when evaluating applications. Requiring the D&I to evaluate each application is therefore not necessary and would only cause delay. I encourage my colleagues to oppose this amendment. Thank you.
Clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Chairman,
No?
Mr. Crapo,
No by proxy?
Mr. Rounds,
No by proxy?
Mr. Tillis, Mr. Kennedy,
No by proxy?
Mr. Haggerty,
No.
Ms. Lummis, Mrs. Britt,
No by proxy?
Mr. Ricketts,
No by proxy?
Mr. Banks,
No by proxy?
Mr. Kramer, Mr. Moreno,
No.
Mr. McCormick,
No by proxy?
Ms. Warren,
Yes.
Mr. Reed, Mr. Warner, Mr. Van Hollen, Ms. Cortez Masto, Ms. Smith, Mr. Warnock, Mr. Kim, Mr. Gallego, Ms. Blunt Rochester, Ms. Also Brooks. Mr. Chairman, the vote is 13 opposed and 11 in favor.
The amendment is not agreed to. We call up Amendment 42 by Senator Warren. Senator Warren, you are now recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have to say, I just don't understand this. These are not hard fixes. They're not going to slow down the bill. They're not going to slow down innovation. Who are we trying to protect? The child pornographers and Iran and North Korea? So let me turn to another problem we've got here. The Genius Act puts the stability of our financial system at risk. And I am deeply worried that, yet again, the public is going to be asked to bail out stablecoin issuers when they go belly up. The bill permits stablecoin issuers to invest in assets that are too risky. It ties regulators' hands in prescribing financial stability safeguards. And stablecoin holders are not insured. So they have an incentive to do a run on the bank and redeem their coins if they worry about what's happening at the issuer. As stablecoin issuers rush to meet redemptions and sell off their assets at fire sale prices, regulators will once again step in to stop the bleeding. We've seen this story before where a new type of shadow bank is created without appropriate safeguards. We bailed out money market funds and other short-term funding markets in 2008 and again in 2020. We bailed out a stablecoin company in 2023 that had $3.3 billion in deposits at Silicon Valley Bank. We will bail out the stablecoin industry the next time the financial system is under duress. If we will not fix those problems with this bill, then we need to at least protect taxpayers and impose market discipline by banning bailouts of this industry. My amendment would prohibit taxpayers and the government from bailing out stablecoin issuers using the Federal Reserve's emergency lending facilities or the Treasury Department's Exchange Stabilization Fund, two common banking bailout strategies. If we can't say that these guys aren't going to get a bailout, then in effect, we're saying, yep, go out there, get your profits, and when things go wrong, come back, and at least somebody here is willing to have the American taxpayer on the line to bail them out. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I urge a yes vote.
We'll have a rebuttal in just a second here from Senator Haggerty. I will say, however, that we are we are not going to be able to vote without a quorum, and we are now down to 12 as opposed to the 13 that we need. So I look forward to hearing the rebuttal. However, strike my comments. I look forward to the rebuttal.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I'm going to urge my colleagues to oppose this amendment. The concerns that were raised by Senator Warren are actually addressed by this bill. If you think about how previous stablecoin issuers actually failed, it's because they held risky assets, and it was because they hid the composition of their reserves. The Genius Act actually solves these problems by ensuring that stablecoins are always backed one-to-one with highly liquid reserves that are published and that are examined on a monthly basis. The amendment, therefore, isn't necessary to improve the bill, and I urge my colleagues to oppose it. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Rochester, for coming back. Appreciate you were hustling. Thank you. The clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Chairman?
No?
Mr. Crapo?
No by proxy?
Mr. Rounds?
No by proxy?
Mr. Tillis?
No by proxy?
Mr. Kennedy?
No by proxy?
Mr. Haggerty?
No.
Ms. Lemus? Mrs. Britt?
No by proxy?
Mr. Ricketts?
No by proxy?
Mr. Banks?
No by proxy?
Mr. Kramer? Mr. Moreno?
No by proxy?
Mr. McCormick?
No by proxy?
Ms. Warren?
Yes.
Mr. Reed? Mr. Warner? Mr. Van Hollen? Ms. Cortez Masto? Ms. Smith? Mr. Warnock?
Yes by proxy.
Mr. Kim?
Yes by proxy.
Mr. Gallego? Ms. Blunt Rochester? Ms. Also Brooks? Mr. Chairman, the vote is 13 opposed and 11 in favor.
The amendment is not agreed to, so we'll call up Reed Amendment 33.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. My amendment addresses the issue that Senator Warren raised, but in a different way. My amendment would narrow the list of permitted investments for stablecoin issuers to ultra-safe assets, specifically cash, insured bank deposits, and short-term treasury bills. The whole point of stablecoins is that they're pegged to the dollar. There's an implicit guarantee that the dollar's worth of stablecoin can be redeemed for an actual dollar at any time. But that might not work unless the assets are really the most liquid and the most secure. The basic bill allows stablecoin issuers to invest customer funds in potentially risky instruments, including repos with unregulated hedge funds, uninsured deposits, or any other liquid asset that is approved by a federal or state regulator. We have proof already, as Senator Warren referred to. In 2008, Reserve Primary Fund, that was a money market sitting on AAA Lehman Brothers debt, which everyone thought was entirely secure. Of course, the debt crashed. We ended up bailing out the money market industry to the tune of $2.7 trillion. We don't want to do that for the industry, the crypto industry. More recently, the stablecoin issuer Circle relied on over $3.3 billion of uninsured deposits at Silicon Valley Bank to back its stablecoin. When the bank failed, we had to step in once again and bail out this entity. So my amendment helps to ensure that this will not happen again, that it will protect customers, taxpayers, stablecoin issuers, and the financial system. I would urge passage and ask for the ayes and nays.
Thank you, Senator Reed. Senator
Mr. Chairman,
Lummis.
I urge my colleagues to oppose this amendment. It restricts unnecessarily the reserve options for stablecoin issuers, and it would make stablecoin issuance not economically viable. Because it would effectively make it difficult, if not impossible, for stablecoin issuers to issue what is essentially traveler's checks in digital form, I urge us to oppose this amendment.
Clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Chairman?
No?
Mr. Crapo?
No by proxy?
Mr. Rounds?
No by proxy?
Mr. Tillis?
No by proxy?
Mr. Kennedy?
No by proxy?
Mr. Haggerty?
No.
Ms. Lemus? No. Mrs. Britt?
No by proxy?
Mr. Ricketts?
No by proxy?
Mr. Banks?
No by proxy?
Mr. Kramer? No. Mr. Moreno?
No by proxy?
Mr. McCormick?
No by proxy?
Ms. Warren,
Yes.
Mr. Reed,
Yes?
Mr. Warner,
Yes.
Mr. Van Hollen,
Yes.
Ms. Cortez Masto,
Yes.
Ms. Smith,
Yes.
Mr. Warnock,
Yes by proxy.
Mr. Kim,
Yes by proxy.
Mr. Gallego, Ms. Blunt Rochester, Ms. Also Brooks. Mr. Chairman, the vote is 13 opposed and 11 in favor.
The amendment is not agreed to. I call up Read 31.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The base bill would require any stablecoin company that has issued $50 billion or more in stablecoins to undergo an independent audit, and that threshold is absurdly high, I believe. Indeed, the $50 billion threshold in this bill would only require a single stablecoin issuer, Circle, to get an annual audit. I propose lowering the threshold in order to align with the bill's other provisions, which require issuers of $10 billion or more of stablecoins to be subject to federal oversight. The principle is simple. If you're large enough to merit federal oversight under this bill, you are also large enough to get an audit. In fact, I think it's remarkable because we spend so much time arguing here how the Department of Defense can't get an audit, and it's so horrible and terrible, et cetera, and yet we're giving a free ride to these companies. I want to remind my colleagues that all banks, regardless of their size, are fully audited. There are literally thousands of banks with less than $10 billion of assets that are able to get audits, and it should not be a problem at all for these issuers. It's a very basic consumer and investor protection. It's indeed the bare minimum. I would ask for the yea vote and ask for the yeas and nays.
Mr. Chairman,
Senator Lummis.
I urge my colleagues to oppose this amendment. The bill requires larger issuers to prepare financial statements that are audited by a registered public accounting firm on a regular basis. Even issuers who are not subject to the bill's audit requirements or the audit requirements of a publicly traded company are required to publish and certify the accuracy of their reserves on a monthly basis. These provisions strike the right balance between consumer protection and transparency without imposing duplicative and costly requirements that discourage innovation and entry into the market. So I urge my colleagues to oppose this amendment.
Thank you, Senator Lummis. We are short one for our necessary quorum to continue voting. At this point, I suggest that perhaps we have an opportunity to hear from Senator either Cortez Masto or Van Hollen on some of your upcoming amendments, if you would like to talk about them, which will save us time in the future as well.
Sure. Mr. Chairman, mine is relatively straightforward, and so I will be brief. It adds...
Oh, you don't have to be brief at this time.
Well, that's all right. And then I'm out of here, Mr. Chairman. It adds to the annual financial disclosure reports provided by senators and members of Congress, the additional requirement that we disclose financial interests in payment stablecoin issuers. So it's a pretty straightforward public disclosure transparency amendment. I would hope that the majority would accept it.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate that. Senator Smith or Cortez Masto, either one of you would like to speak on your upcoming amendment?
Yes, I will, but Mr. Chairman, out of all due respect to you, and I have a lot of respect, this is not regular order.
No.
Not only does it seem like we're taking the time to talk about our amendments, but there's no debate, and there's some very good amendments here, by the way, and I'm hopeful that we have a good product coming out of here, but it is the Democrats now holding the quorum here instead of the Republicans. And we've just lost the quorum. Here's my concern. This is a great starting product. I applaud my colleagues for doing this. It's a great start, but it is not ready for prime time. And there are many of us that want to work with you to make it ready for prime time. And I was hopeful that we would have the opportunity to do that here, because that's what this is about. But it's not happening. And I'm frustrated because I know there are some good players out there that want a good, strong legislation that we can bring them together. But I already, and I will talk about my amendment, because my amendment is really a concern that even the American Bankers Association just gave to us with concerns about it. My first amendment, number 11, it removes subsection B in paragraph 7 of 4A. Subsection B gives payment stablecoin issuers the ability to engage in any non-payment stablecoin activity. My amendment would expressly limit the activities of a stablecoin issuer to only the activities that directly support the work of issuing and redeeming stablecoins, managing the reserves, and providing custodial services. These parameters are already outlined in the preceding 5 subsections of the bill. They're already there. They're already there. And I know one of my colleagues had the same concerns that I did. And so this is my concern, is these are not unreasonable. These are conversations that we need to have. But the inclusion of subsection B totally negates the guardrails that are supported here. And so there are many that want to provide a good product at the end of the day, but it looks like to me the die is already cast. You get what you get. Tether gets to decide what's in this regulation and what isn't. And the good players that are out there that want to work with all of us in a good, strong, bipartisan legislation, we're not going to have it. And so that's my frustration. And I have so much respect for you and my colleagues, because this is a great start, but it is not a great start to really getting a good product at the end of the day and bringing all the stakeholders together.
Thank you very much, Senator Cortez Masto. Let me just say this. When I became chairman of this committee, I was transparent about my intention to return to regular order. I'm here to legislate for the American people, and we've been working nights, days, weekends in order to get this accomplished. Anyone who doesn't know where the stablecoin legislation lie is not on me or this committee. Frankly, we've had a number of conversations, and frankly, I started off with bipartisan amendments because, frankly, there has been an engagement on both sides of this aisle. The one thing you can't say on both sides of this dais, I should say, one thing you can't say about this process is that it lacks transparency, or that you haven't had an opportunity to engage in the debate. This is a part of the process of debate, and frankly, I will say that while I have not agreed to any of the amendments, the challenge that we have is not whether or not we agree to the amendments, it's whether or not you have an opportunity to share your frustrations, your concerns, and frankly, to redirect the process. I am thankful that we've had an opportunity to do so. I'm thankful that we've had an opportunity to do it in public. I'm thankful that we have Senator Cortez Masto as a part of this committee, and frankly, you bring a lot of weight and so you soberness to our committee, and that has been a blessing to all of us who want to get a finished product, whether we're talking about the Firm Act, stablecoins, or other pieces of legislation going forward.
And thank you, Mr. Chairman. And so, and based on that, and excuse me to the ranking member, but here's my hope, and I would hope, and this is my offer to my colleagues that wrote this, because you did an incredible job. I would hope that you would remain open to still include provisions that we can agree on together that are going to approve this bill based on what we're still hearing from folks in the industry who want to be a part of this. If you're willing to do that, that would make me really feel much better about today's process, which looks like clearly it's already been set in stone. But if I'm hoping you're open, even after today's hearing, to improve this and willing to take amendments if we can come to a reasonable agreement and keep an open mind, so that at the final product, when we go to the floor, if it comes to the floor for a Senate vote, that we have an improved product. Would you be willing to do that?
Mr. Chairman.
Senator Haggerty.
I'd just like to highlight the fact that Senator Lummis chaired a bipartisan subcommittee hearing, working session on this bill. We had a robust discussion in that regard. Our staff have been working night and day on this. The discussion draft has been out since last October on this bill, and we have benefited, I think, from a very robust bipartisan process. I appreciate the input from all of our colleagues on both sides of the aisle. We're going to continue to work to improve this. I've already acknowledged my willingness to do that here today, to the extent that there are additional technical corrections, or in many cases, valid issues are being raised that I think are far more appropriate for a market structure piece of legislation. And I'm more than willing to work with my colleagues on that market structure piece, but that should come next in order. Thank you.
Senator Warren?
So I share Senator Cortez Masto's concerns, and I think the concerns of all of us who are still here. Most of the Republicans have left, and it's hard to have a discussion about our amendments if there isn't anyone here to discuss them with, or if the number of people it takes to be able to try to persuade why we might need some changes. I appreciate the hard work that you've done. I didn't get to see a draft of this until Monday night, and then see the amended draft until this morning. The process, regular order, which I commend the chair for his commitment to trying to get us back to regular order and a process that works, is exactly this. My only other experience is in the Senate Armed Services Committee, where we routinely say, I've got an idea for an amendment. People put it out there, they talk about it, they say, well, I think that's a bad idea, and here's 6 reasons why I think it's a bad idea. Somebody else says it's a good idea. I think it's fair to say we don't vote party line. We vote trying to work through, because these are big and important questions. This feels like show trial here, that we get up and we read our little part about each of the amendments, and the Republicans, clearly, a majority of Republicans have already decided their vote without even hearing anyone make an argument for why this might be an amendment that would be appropriate for this bill. The second thing I want to say is exactly what Senator Cortez Masto said, and that is there is a bill to be done that could get wide support in the United States Senate. That bill is possible. This is not a case of, no, what we're all trying to do is figure out how to blow the thing up. There are people who want to support this, but there are also legitimate concerns. You have given us a strong base, but I've got an amendment here that's raised by the community bankers. Are we really not going to have a discussion about what it means to issue stable coins and what the impact will be on community bankers? Senator Cortez Masto has one from the American Bankers Association. So we don't have a quorum.
Yep.
We don't have a discussion. I recommend here, Mr. Chairman, that we suspend these proceedings till we can come back together and actually have a discussion in regular order, as I know you are so deeply committed to.
Well, thankfully, my script here says let's recess until 11:15, so I'm glad that you and I are already on the same page as I've just written that down. However, I will say before I recess the committee until 11:15 to give us all a chance to go vote, I'm thankful that the process is what it is. The process is messy. Markups are messy. The fact of the matter is we have an opportunity to read the amendments before we come to the committee. If the first time you read the amendment is during the committee, that's on you, not on me. I think we both, on both sides of this dais, care about the underlying issue. And frankly, the American people care more about the underlying issue. So let's not pretend that this is the first time you've had an opportunity to do this, or that this is the only way it's being done in the Senate Banking Committee. Frankly, this is the way that it's happened throughout all of Congress, the 15 years I've been here. The one thing that hasn't happened until right now is an actual markup. Because for years in the minority, there was not a single markup that I participated in, because there was not a single markup that we brought to the table. So perhaps the problem that we face today is that we've forgotten what this process feels like, looks like, and it is messy. We all serve on multiple committees at the exact same time. We're gonna have to get used to being uncomfortable with progress. This is what it looks like. And with that, we will recess until 11:15 after the floor votes. The committee will come to order. We will resume the executive session and move directly to a vote on Read Amendment 31. Clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Chairman.
No?
Mr. Crapo.
No.
Mr. Rounds. No. Mr. Tillis. No. Mr. Kennedy.
No by proxy?
Mr. Haggerty.
No by proxy?
Ms. Lemus. No. Mrs. Britt. No. Mr. Ricketts. No. Mr. Banks.
No by proxy?
Mr. Kramer.
No by proxy?
Mr. Moreno.
No.
Mr. McCormick.
No by proxy?
Ms. Warren.
Aye.
Mr. Reed. Mr. Warner. Mr. Van Hollen.
Aye by proxy.
Ms. Cortez Masto. Ms. Smith. Mr. Warnock.
Aye by proxy.
Mr. Kim. Mr. Gallego. Ms. Blunt Rochester. Ms. Also Brooks.
Aye by proxy.
Mr. Chairman, the vote is 13 opposed, 11 in favor.
The amendment is not agreed to.
Mr. Chairman?
Senator Moreno?
Yeah, if I could just maybe finish off where we left before recess. And I think I can safely say that Republicans would love to get into a real conversation with the other side to get good things done. I don't think it's fun for either one of us to go back to our constituents and explain to them why we can't get things done. I think most voters expect that this body works functionally. But I think we also have to be cognizant of hyperbole that just doesn't make any sense. The ranking member, you talked about the importance of national security, and I agree with you. And I think it's important for us to recognize that what are stablecoins intended to do. And I think most people who've only lived in the United States don't even understand what's the point. Like, you don't see yourself going to 7-Eleven and buying it with a stablecoin. But there's places like the country I came from, Colombia, where payments don't exist. And you don't have the ability to transact. You have places like the Bahamas and Africa where payment systems are not matured. So we have facing us is a choice. Do we want China to own the stablecoin market? Now, nobody is interested in the Chinese currency as a stablecoin, so they've tried to make it a BRICS stablecoin, but you can't take 4 pieces of crap and make chocolate. So we have the alternative, which is to have a U.S.-denominated stablecoin that becomes a world standard. That protects the integrity of the U.S. dollar around the world. Like, we should be applauding that, saying, my God, we have the ability to have and own this technology that fortifies the U.S. dollar. That would lead to more national security. And I get that there's a lot of breakup issues with Elon Musk, but that Elon Musk has nothing to do with this legislation. Nothing to do with it. And when you say that this makes child trafficking and sex trafficking and drug trafficking and fentanyl trafficking more, you know what does that? Open borders. Open borders, where over the last 4 years, we had 10 million border encounters. We're down to 8,000 a month. So I would just ask my colleagues to kind of think about that.
Thank you, sir. We're going to go to amendment number 11.
So, wait a minute. If we're going to have discussion, can we have discussion on both sides here?
You can have 2 minutes. Certainly.
Okay, before we talk about hyperbole, can we just look at what the industry itself says when they say that 60% of the financing that's going through for these child pornographers and drug traffickers for Iran and North Korea are coming through stablecoin? And no one's asking not to do stablecoin. We're just saying, can we please just do it in a way that keeps enough guardrails around it so good issuers who want to do this can continue to do it? Asking, for example, for an amendment that says, can we just check these guys and make sure that they don't have a history of being child pornographers before they get to issue their coins, that they don't have a background in drug trafficking? This is not a hard thing. This doesn't try to upset the whole apple cart and tear it apart. It's just some basic pieces that our side of the aisle is trying to get in place so that it works in a safe and dependable way. That's all that anybody here is looking for. Nobody's looking to shut this down. No one's looking to stop innovation. But we do want to try to make this a little cleaner than it is right now.
All right.
Mr. Chairman.
You're welcome. Let me just have the last word on this, and we're going to move on. Number one, the current legislation actually increases transparency from money laundering. I think it was the 2018 Journal on Money Laundering that said that the current system in 2018 missed 99.9% of money laundering. This is a leap into a different world and a better world, and we will continue with Cortez Masto Amendment number 11.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, ma'am.
This amendment would remove Section B in the existing bill, paragraph 7 of Section 4A. And Section B gives payment stablecoin issuers the ability to engage in any non-payment stablecoin activity. This amendment would expressly limit the activities of a stablecoin issuer to only the activities that directly support the work of issuing and redeeming stablecoins, managing those reserves, and providing custodial services. Now, here's why I'm doing this, because if you look at the legislation, those parameters are already outlined in the preceding 5 subsections of the bill. It's already there. So the Section B here, I'm not sure what it does other than negate what we've already put in to the preceding sections. Clearly the reason why they put it in, I would imagine, is because the good folks that were drafting this starting legislation, which, let me just say, this is a good first start. It's just not ready for prime time. This is a great first start. But whoever drafted it made clear to put those subsections in. And so I'm not quite sure what subsection B does other than negate those clear guardrails. And I would like to submit to the record the American Bankers Association letter. I think we all received it, which clearly spells out some of those concerns that I have highlighted with Section B. And my concern is that stablecoin issuer is permitted to have a complex business with financial activities far beyond the scope of what they are registered for. I think we've made it very clear in the legislation, if you're going to register as a stablecoin issuer, do that alone. That's what this is about. We're setting the guardrails, we're setting the parameters, so let's start there. And if we have to open the door, then let's have a further conversation around it. But we've already set the guardrails, and it's a good starting point. So I would ask my colleagues to join me in supporting this amendment.
Mr. Chairman,
Senator Lummis.
I urge my colleagues to oppose this amendment. The Act already carefully limits the activities of permitted payment stablecoin issuers in ways that ensure consumer protection. And that's what we need to be balancing here, is consumer protection and permitted activities by stablecoin issuers. So efforts to further limit the activities of permitted payment stablecoin issuers will discourage potential issuers from entering the market. Now, one of the things that this market brings as an unintended but happy consequence is that stablecoin issuers are purchasing U.S. Treasuries in tremendous amounts to make them the 100% hard asset-backed asset of stablecoins. This creates a massive new market for U.S. Treasuries that will help further keep the United States dollar the world reserve currency. So this new market for what we think is one of the most stable assets in the world, U.S. Treasuries, is something we should be encouraging. Now, the way the bill's currently written, it does limit the activities of permitted payment stablecoin issuers to ensure consumer protection. I think Senator Hagerty has hit the sweet spot on this. We don't want to harm consumers or the markets for U.S. Treasuries by limiting its potential. Mr. Chairman, I urge opposition to the amendment.
The clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Chairman.
No?
Mr. Crapo. No. Mr. Rounds.
No by proxy?
Mr. Tillis.
No.
Mr. Kennedy.
No.
Mr. Hagerty.
No.
Ms. Lemus.
No.
Mrs. Britt. No. Mr. Ricketts.
No by proxy?
Mr. Banks. No. Mr. Kramer.
No by proxy?
Mr. Moreno.
No.
Mr. McCormick.
No by proxy?
Ms. Warren.
Yes.
Mr. Reed? Mr. Warner?
Yes.
Mr. Van Hollen?
Yes.
Ms. Cortez Masto?
Yes.
Ms. Smith?
Yes.
Mr. Warnock? Mr. Kim? Mr. Gallego? Ms. Blunt Rochester? Ms. Also Brooks?
Yes, by proxy.
Mr. Chairman, the vote is 13 opposed, 11 in favor.
The amendment is not agreed to. We'll call up Cortez Masto, amendment number 12.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Yes, ma'am.
This is in addition to Section 8. My amendment is it's very easy. It gives the Secret Service the authority they need to better deter and detect money laundering, drug trafficking, terrorist financing, and other thefts and fraud facilitated through unlicensed money transmitting businesses. Currently, the way the bill was written, Secret Service has no authority to go after illegal online platforms facilitating the buying and selling of stablecoins or other cryptocurrencies. This amendment is just very simple. It gives and provides the Secret Service with the tools they need to go and eradicate that criminal activity, and I would ask my colleagues to support it.
Mr. Chairman,
Senator Haggerty.
I'm going to urge my colleagues to oppose this amendment. This amendment expands the Secret Service's investigative authorities. I believe that would be much better suited for a separate discussion on financial crime. It's not related to stablecoins in the Genius Act, and that's why I'm going to urge my colleagues to vote against it. Thank you.
The clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Chairman?
No?
Mr. Crapo?
No.
Mr. Rounds?
No by proxy.
Mr. Tillis? No. Mr. Kennedy?
No.
Mr. Haggerty?
No.
Ms. Lummis? No. Mrs. Britt? No. Mr. Ricketts?
No by proxy.
Mr. Banks? No. Mr. Kramer?
No by proxy.
Mr. Moreno?
No.
Mr. McCormick?
No by proxy.
Ms. Warren?
Yes.
Mr. Reed? Yes. Mr. Warner? Yes. Mr. Van Hollen? Yes. Ms. Cortez Masto? Yes. Ms. Smith? Yes. Mr. Warnock? Yes. Mr. Kim? Yes. Mr. Gallego? Yes. Ms. Blunt Rochester? Yes. Ms. Also Brooks?
Oh, yes, by proxy.
Mr. Chairman, the vote is 13 opposed and 11 in favor.
The amendment is not agreed to. I call up Smith Amendment number 53.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I'm offering Smith Amendment number 53. This is, I think, a simple amendment. What this amendment would do, colleagues, is to say that federal and state payment stablecoin regulators, so the regulators would develop standards to make sure that consumers can quickly and easily redeem their stablecoins for the base value. I appreciate that this legislation requires stablecoin issuers to publish their policies about what those redemption standards would be, but that just concerns me, colleagues, that doesn't go far enough. That it just makes sense that we would have kind of a base level of standards set for how quickly you can get your stablecoin redeemed, like how will the value of your redemption be established. And of course, I realize that most of the time this probably wouldn't be an issue, but we also know that there is volatility in digital asset markets, and there could be a run on withdrawals, and then consumers are there trying to figure out how to redeem their stablecoin. And all my amendment would do is to ensure that those trying to redeem their stablecoins would have basic protections in place without a bunch of delays or fees. So this is a simple addition, I think. I think it would go a long way towards promoting consumer confidence and fairness in stablecoin. And I ask my colleagues for their questions or their support for this amendment.
Mr. Chairman,
Senator Haggerty.
I'm going to urge my colleagues to oppose this amendment. The amendment is already addressed in the bill. The Genius Act creates requirements for issuing payment stablecoins, which include establishing procedures for timely redemptions of outstanding payment stablecoins. The amendment that's been proposed is simply too prescriptive, and it can actually undermine the efforts of regulators to establish redemption procedures. So therefore, I'm going to urge my colleagues to oppose this amendment. Thank you.
Clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Chairman?
No?
Mr. Crapo? No. Mr. Rounds?
No by proxy.
Mr. Tillis? No. Mr. Kennedy? No. Mr. Haggerty?
No.
Ms. Lummis?
No.
Mrs. Britt? No. Mr. Ricketts?
No by proxy.
Mr. Banks? No. Mr. Kramer?
No by proxy.
Mr. Moreno?
No.
Mr. McCormick? No. Ms. Warren?
Yes.
Mr. Reed? Yes. Mr. Warner, Mr. Van Hollen,
Yes, by proxy.
Ms. Cortez Masto,
Yes.
Ms. Smith,
Yes?
Mr. Warnock,
Yes.
Mr. Kim, Mr. Gallego, Ms. Blunt Rochester, Ms. Also Brooks.
Yes, by proxy.
Mr. Chairman, the vote is 13 opposed, 11 in favor.
The amendment is not agreed to. I call up amendment number 55, the Smith Amendment.
Mr. Chair, I withdraw this amendment.
All right. I call up Warnock Amendment 35.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I call up Amendment 35. The CFPB was created in the wake of the great financial crisis. Americans saw Wall Street bankers get bailouts as millions lost their jobs, lost their homes, and lost their life savings and retirements. While the Trump administration has gutted the CFPB, we've all seen this over the last few weeks, firing dozens, stopping certain consumer protection activities, and even kicking the Bureau out of their building. The CFPB's rules and regulations do remain on the books. And so I offer a simple amendment. While additional consumer protections have been negotiated and added to this bill, it is important to make it clear to stablecoin issuers, digital asset exchanges, and consumers that the Bureau's protections apply, that stablecoin is not an exception to the rule. So my amendment is simple. It changes nothing with the base text of the bill. It simply affirms that nothing in the bill changes, limits, or removes protections consumers currently receive legally from the CFPB. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I ask for a roll call vote on my amendment.
Mr. Chairman?
Senator Lummis.
Yeah, I appreciate my colleague from Georgia. But I'll tell you, and I'm opposing this amendment. I urge my colleagues to oppose it. This is, at its core, a consumer protection bill that establishes a first-of-its-kind federal framework to regulate payment stablecoins. The Consumer Financial Protection Bureau's scope is already outlined in statute, so if this fits, they will have authority. If it doesn't fit, this bill will have authority. So this amendment just invites regulatory overreach, in my opinion, and it doesn't increase consumer protection. For that reason, I encourage us to oppose this amendment.
Mr. Chair, with all due respect to my colleague, if what she's saying is true, then my question is, what are we concerned about? What are we afraid of?
The clerk will call the roll.
The subtext has not changed. The text of the bill is the same. Why won't we affirm what you just said?
Clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Chairman,
No?
Mr. Crapo. No. Mr. Rounds,
No by proxy?
Mr. Tillis. No. Mr. Kennedy. No. Mr. Haggerty.
No.
Ms. Lemus.
No.
Mrs. Britt.
No.
Mr. Ricketts.
No.
Mr. Banks. Mr. Kramer.
No by proxy?
Mr. Moreno.
No.
Mr. McCormick. Ms. Warren.
Yes.
Mr. Reed. Mr. Warner. Mr. Van Hollen.
Yes, by proxy.
Ms. Cortez Masto.
Yes.
Ms. Smith.
Yes.
Mr. Warnock.
Yes.
Mr. Kim. Yes. Mr. Gallego. Ms. Blunt Rochester.
I love it.
Ms. Also Brooks.
Yes, by proxy.
Mr. Chairman, the vote is 13 opposed and 11 in favor.
The amendment is not agreed to. We call up Warnock Amendment number 36. Senator Warnock is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Before I get to this next amendment, I just want to make a note here. As Republicans are steamrolling this bill through the committee, Bloomberg just broke the news that the Trump family's crypto company is in discussions with Binance on doing business, including possibly creating a new stablecoin. For those of you who don't remember, Binance pleaded guilty to criminal charges for, quote, willful failures that allowed money to flow to terrorists, cyber criminals, and child abusers through its platform. We have a chance right now to fix this bill to prevent commercial empires like the Trump Organization from
Senator
issuing.
Warren, I actually called on
Oh,
Senator
I'm
Warnock.
so sorry. I
know
thought you called
they
on me.
sound similar, but
I'm actually withdrawing my amendment, so I would yield to Senator Warner.
I thought we only had one from Senator Warnock. I apologize.
okay, no problem.
Am I up next?
Actually, it was Kim.
Okay.
Yeah,
I
we'll get to you though.
apologize.
We're
I
coming.
apologize.
Senator Kim, your amendment number 38.
Thank you. I would like to introduce the Kim Amendment 38, although I'm not asking for a vote. I must express my deep concern with the evidence showing that cryptocurrencies, particularly stablecoin, have been utilized by numerous bad actors, including by drug cartels, foreign terrorist organizations, to finance their illicit activities. There needs to be deterrence under law to ensure that stablecoin issuers do not engage in any activities that would facilitate funds to any such cartels or foreign terrorist organizations. I'm pleased to see that the additions added to this bill since its initial introduction with respect to the illicit finance provisions, but more needs to be done to help counter bad actors. Congress, all of us, overwhelmingly supported designating cartels as foreign terrorist organizations. We have to make sure that we are not making decisions that could strengthen them and other foreign terrorist organizations and building up their strength and helping them evade sanctions. One critical way to deter such illicit activities is to require annual certifications by the issuers. I'm going to keep fighting to finalize my amendment as this bill moves out of committee to deter issuers from engaging in illicit finance acts. I'm also going to keep fighting to establish a comprehensive AML, BSA, illicit finance framework beyond just issuers in the crypto ecosystem in future pieces of legislation, including a market structure bill. This should be a bipartisan concern, and I look forward to working with my colleagues on both sides of the aisle on this very important issue. At this moment, I will withdraw this amendment and continue to work with my Republican colleagues on language to be able to address this. And I yield back, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Haggerty?
Mr. Chairman, may I make a statement?
Certainly.
I agree with Senator Kim that illicit activities by drug cartels, foreign terrorist organizations, and state actors are a serious issue that cannot be ignored. And as such, we must ensure that just as in traditional finance, there are deterrents under law that ensure that stablecoin issuers don't in any way inadvertently facilitate these sorts of activities. So I want to make it clear that I commit to working with Senator Kim to finalize an amendment as the bill moves forward to ensure that issuers annually certify that they're not enabling such activities subject to civil and criminal penalties. So I also commit to working with Senator Kim to establish a comprehensive anti-money laundering and illicit finance framework that would be applicable to the entities beyond the issuer in the digital assets ecosystem in future pieces of legislation that would include, but not be limited to, a forthcoming market structure bill. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Welcome. Senator Kim, amendment 39. That was 38. Do you want to do 39?
I think that's me. I'm on 39. I'm going to do 39.
Oh, as
We're
opposed to.
co-sponsors.
Okay, so Warren
All right.
/ Kim, 39.
All right.
Got it.
So while we've been sitting here, Bloomberg has just broken the news that the Trump family's crypto company has been in discussions with Binance on doing business, including possibly creating a new stablecoin, exactly what we're debating right now. And for those of you who don't remember, Binance pleaded guilty to criminal charges for, quote, willful failures that allowed money to flow to terrorists, cyber criminals, and child abusers through its platform. We have the chance to fix this right here in this committee. And literally just an hour ago, every Republican voted against an amendment to do exactly that. We should be standing up to this kind of naked corruption, not trying to figure out how to build a superhighway so it can take off even faster, bigger, and better. Look, the amendment I have here is about issuers get coins that they can put out into the world, just like the government prints money. And for regular money, we require banks and other financial institutions, the ones that actually move that money around and facilitate those transactions, to follow basic rules to protect against money laundering, terrorist financing, sanctions evasions, and other financial crimes. The co-sponsors of this bill, I think, started in the right direction. They made it clear they don't want stable coins to be used to supercharge that kind of criminal activity, but the bill imposes those restrictions only on the initial issuer, not on the other key players who are more likely to be moving money into the hands of the bad actors. The amendment I propose would fix that by making clear that the same rules apply to moving money to the basic institutions that move this money around. So it would apply to exchanges and wallet providers that actually move these stable coins. I urge everyone to vote yes on this to protect our financial system.
This article has nothing to do with what we're here doing today. What's in front of us today is not consistent with the article. Our bill is focused on payment stablecoins, not digital asset exchanges. Bringing up the article serves as a distraction from the legislation that's in front of us right now. We are here to advance a first-of-its-kind regulatory framework that advances the standing of the U.S. dollar, protects consumers, and protects national security. This bill is critical for the digital asset and payments innovation, which we must lead around the globe. The clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Chairman.
No.
Mr. Crapo.
No.
Mr. Rounds.
No by proxy.
Mr. Tillis. No. Mr. Kennedy. No. Mr. Haggerty.
No.
Ms. Lemus. No. Mrs. Britt.
No.
Mr. Ricketts.
No.
Mr. Banks. No. Mr. Kramer.
No by proxy.
Mr. Moreno.
No.
Mr. McCormick. Ms. Warren.
Yes.
Mr. Reed. Mr. Warner. Mr. Van Hollen.
Yes by proxy.
Ms. Cortez Masto.
Yes.
Ms. Smith.
Yes?
Mr. Warnock.
Yes.
Mr. Kim.
Yes.
Mr. Gallego. Yes. Ms. Blunt Rochester. Yes. Ms. Also Brooks.
Yes by proxy.
Mr. Chairman, the vote is 13 opposed and 11 in favor.
The amendment is not agreed to. I call up Blunt Rochester Amendment number 66. Senator Blunt Rochester.
Thank you, Chairman Scott. I'd like to call up and withdraw Amendment number 66. I appreciate the willingness of my colleagues to improve the bill in a bipartisan manner. And in the manager's amendment, I was able to secure a number of enhancements to this bill that will strengthen its consumer protections and improve the safety and soundness of the banking system. And I'd like to thank Mr. Tillis and Mr. Rounds for working with me on some of my amendments. And while the bill is improved, I think we still have a ways to go to strengthen it even further. I'm particularly concerned when some of the easy amendments that deal with drug trafficking and child pornography can't get in, that causes some concern. My amendment would help safeguard the data of consumers from being sold, especially by non-banks, without enhanced protections. Mr. Chairman, as I said, I'm going to withdraw my amendment today to continue to work towards improving the consumer protections in this bill and on the Senate floor.
Thank
and
you,
I yield
ma'am.
back.
Yes, ma'am. Senator Reed, Amendment number 30, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My amendment authorizes regulators to crack down on excessive executive compensation arrangements. Bank regulators have this authority, but stablecoin regulators would not, and I think that's a mistake. Because stablecoin issuers make money by investing customer funds, executives have incentives to chase the highest yielding assets, and those are usually the most riskful assets. By one estimate, the biggest stablecoin issuer, Tether, is the most profitable company per employee in the world, even more than the biggest banks. You don't make that much profit without taking some risk. My amendment will help ensure that crypto executives do not take excessive risk with customers' money to make short-term profits while leaving customers and taxpayers holding the bag in the future. Limiting excessive compensation is a fundamental part of safety and soundness regulation, and I would urge an aye vote.
Senator Haggerty.
I'm going to urge my colleagues to oppose this amendment. The bill includes several provisions that are designed to protect consumers and to deter bad actors from serving as directors or officers of permitted stablecoin issuers. If additional explicit restrictions on executive compensation are necessary, they can be addressed in a rulemaking. So I encourage my colleagues to oppose this amendment. Thank you.
Clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Chairman.
No?
Mr. Crapo. No. Mr. Rounds.
No by proxy.
Mr. Tillis. No. Mr. Kennedy. No. Mr. Haggerty. No. Ms. Lemus. No. Mrs. Britt.
No.
Mr. Ricketts.
No.
Mr. Banks.
No by proxy.
Mr. Kramer. No. Mr. Moreno.
Oh, no by proxy. You guys look a little
Mr.
like that.
McCormick. Ms. Warren.
Yes.
Mr. Reed.
Yes?
Mr. Warner. Yes. Mr. Van Hollen.
Yes by proxy.
Ms. Cortez Masto.
Yes.
Ms. Smith.
Yes.
Mr. Warnock.
Yes.
Mr. Kim.
Yes by proxy.
Mr. Gallego.
Yes by proxy.
Ms. Blunt Rochester. Ms. Elsa Brooks.
Yes by proxy. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Didn't know you were there.
Mr. Chairman, the vote is 13 opposed and 11 in favor.
The amendment is not agreed to. We'll call up Reed number 25. Senator Reed, you're recognized.
Thank you again, Mr. Chairman. This amendment enables the Treasury Department to sanction the crypto mixing services that are used by North Korea and other rogue states and criminal enterprises to launder crypto that they receive through hacking, ransomware, and drug trafficking. Just 2 weeks ago, North Korea pulled off the biggest crypto hack of all time. The Lazarus Group hackers stole $1.4 billion in crypto from the Bybit exchange and then laundered it using mixers to make it untraceable. In 2022, North Korea stole $600 million in the Ronin Bridge hack. The crypto that North Korea has stolen and laundered includes stable coins like Circle and Tether. My amendment helps ensure that these laundering tools are not available. That will deprive North Korea of funding that is using to develop WMD and to support Russia's illegal invasion of Ukraine. I would ask the yeas and nays and urge a yea vote.
Mr. Chairman.
Senator Haggerty.
The Genius Act already has robust anti-money laundering provisions related to stablecoins. The Act imposes requirements on stablecoin providers that strengthen national security and improve the Treasury Department's ability to monitor the sector. Broader discussions on anti-money laundering and amending the International Emergency Economic Powers Act should take place in another context, not this one. As such, this amendment is outside the scope of the bill, and I'm going to encourage my colleagues to vote no.
The clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Chairman.
No?
Mr. Crapo.
No.
Mr. Rounds.
No by proxy.
Mr. Tillis. No. Mr. Kennedy. No. Mr. Haggerty.
No.
Ms. Lemus.
No.
Mrs. Britt.
No.
Mr. Ricketts.
Nope.
Mr. Banks. No. Mr. Kramer. No. Mr. Moreno.
No by proxy.
Mr. McCormick. Ms. Warren.
Yes.
Mr. Reed.
Yes?
Mr. Warner. Mr. Van Hollen.
Yes by proxy.
Ms. Cortez Masto. Ms. Smith. Mr. McCormick, or sorry, Mr. Warnock. Mr. Kim.
Yes by proxy.
Mr. Gallego.
Yes by proxy.
Ms. Blunt Rochester. Ms. Elsa Brooks. Mr. Chairman, the vote is 13 opposed and 11 in favor.
The amendment is not agreed to. I'll call up Cortez Masto, amendment number 13. Senator Cortez Masto, you're
Thank you.
recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is in addition to Section 4 within the existing bill. My amendment ensures a stablecoin issuer cannot hold reserves at the Central Bank of China, Iran, Russia, or any other nation deemed adversarial to the United States. The bill has to ensure that an insurer can hold those stablecoin reserves, cannot hold those stablecoin reserves at a hostile country's bank without any regulator or customers knowing about that risk. I mean, just imagine if an adversary could lock up a permitted U.S. stablecoin issuer's reserves as a result of a geopolitical factor. We really cannot give our enemies that type of leverage. Such an action by a foreign adversary could cause great risk and harm to people holding the stablecoin reserves. And so I would ask my colleagues to support me in this amendment.
Mr. Chairman.
Senator Haggerty.
We have no control over what foreign depository institutions can hold as deposits. The other issue, I think, and I think Senator Lummis described it very, very well, is that we want to increase demand for treasuries around the globe, not limit it. And this amendment, as it's drafted, is an overreach. It could harm the global appeal of U.S. dollar-denominated stablecoins. I'm going to urge my colleagues to oppose it. Thank you.
Clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Chairman.
Nope.
Mr. Crapo. Mr. Rounds. Mr. Tillis. Mr. Kennedy.
No.
Mr. Haggerty.
No.
Ms. Lummis. Mrs. Britt.
No.
Mr. Ricketts.
No.
Mr. Banks. Mr. Kramer. Mr. Moreno.
No by proxy.
Mr. McCormick. Ms. Warren.
Yes.
Mr. Reed.
Yes.
Mr. Warner.
Yes.
Mr. Van Hollen.
Yes by proxy.
Ms. Cortez Masto.
Yes.
Ms. Smith.
Yes.
Mr. Warnock. Yes. Mr. Kim.
Yes by proxy.
Mr. Gallego.
Yes by proxy.
Ms. Blunt Rochester.
Yes.
Ms. Alsobrooks.
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, the vote is 13 opposed, 11 in favor.
The amendment is not agreed to. We'll call up Cortez Masto, amendment number 14. Senator Cortez Masto.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is, again, in addition to Section 4, and this amendment would protect not only people, but also U.S. national security and dollar supremacy. Specifically, my amendment would ensure that people in the U.S. could only access payment stablecoins if the stablecoin is redeemable solely in dollars or money issued by the central bank of a G7 member. This will prohibit stablecoins from being redeemed by the central bank of any adversarial country, such as China, Iran, Russia, or other hostile nations. This amendment also prohibits payment stablecoins from being redeemed for any money issued by any intergovernmental organization. This could include multinational development banks like the China-sponsored Asian Infrastructure Bank or New Development Bank or the Russia-sponsored Eurasian Development Bank. If we want to ensure the dollar's supremacy around the globe with stablecoins, this amendment would further this goal. My amendment would also prevent U.S. stablecoin holders from unknowingly supporting foreign adversaries through redemptions at central banks or multinational development banks in hostile nations, and I ask my colleagues to support it.
Senator Haggerty, you're recognized.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. This amendment would actually allow stablecoins to be tied to other countries' currencies. The purpose of the Genius Act is to ensure that U.S. stablecoins are backed solely by U.S. treasuries and U.S. dollars. It's critical that we maintain the exclusive U.S. dollar backing for stablecoins to preserve the American dollar as the world's reserve currency. Therefore, I'm going to urge my colleagues to oppose this amendment. Thank you.
The clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Chairman.
Nope.
Mr. Crapo.
Nope.
Mr. Rounds. Mr. Tillis.
Nope.
Mr. Kennedy.
No.
Mr. Haggerty.
No.
Ms. Lummis.
No.
Mrs. Britt.
No.
Mr. Ricketts.
Nope.
Mr. Banks. Mr. Kramer. Mr. Moreno.
No by proxy.
Mr. McCormick.
No.
Ms. Warren.
Yes.
Mr. Reed. Mr. Warner. Mr. Van Hollen.
Yes by proxy.
Ms. Cortez Masto. Ms. Smith.
Yes.
Mr. Warnock. Mr. Kim.
Yes by proxy.
Mr. Gallego. Ms. Blunt Rochester. Ms. Alsobrooks. Mr. Chairman, the vote is 13 opposed, 11 in favor.
The amendment is not agreed to. We'll call up Smith Amendment 54. Senator Smith, you are recognized, ma'am.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm going to offer this amendment and then withdraw it. I note a distinct trend in the voting, so I will not ask my colleagues to vote again on this, but I would ask that folks pay attention to what I am raising in this amendment because I think it's important. This amendment would say that it is not lawful, that we would not be requiring community banks or credit unions that don't issue stablecoin to pay into a rescue fund for stablecoin issuers. You know, we saw what happened with Silicon Valley Bank and with Signature Bank when I understand that wasn't stablecoin. I'm just saying that for digital assets and for stablecoin in addition, the need to rescue banks that got themselves into a very dicey situation. And it doesn't seem right to me that we would be asking community banks that are so important to all of our states to be paying into a rescue fund in this case. So all my amendment would do would be to ensure that if stablecoins ever do become too big to fail and would require a bailout, that community banks and credit unions wouldn't be on the hook for that.
Thank you, ma'am. We'll call up Reed, Amendment 22. With Senator Reed, you are now recognized.
Thank you very much again, Mr. Chairman. My amendment affirms that the U.S. dollar is the official currency of the United States of America and that it cannot be replaced by an alternative as legal tender. That means our taxes can be paid only in dollars, our military can be paid only in dollars, and our mortgages can be paid only in dollars. Throughout the world, opposing powers are trying to displace the United States economically and the dollar as the most dominant currency. And if that happens, we will be in a very difficult situation. My amendment is designed to ensure that enemies of the United States cannot supplant the dollar with unregulated offshore alternatives or other currencies. So I would ask for the yeas and nays. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman.
Senator Haggerty.
Mr. Chairman, very simply, the Genius Act is very narrowly focused on providing a workable framework for permitted payment stablecoins. This amendment is simply outside the scope of the bill and shouldn't be adopted at this point. I urge my colleagues to oppose the amendment. Thank you.
The clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Chairman.
No.
Mr. Crapo.
No.
Mr. Rounds.
No by proxy.
Mr. Tillis. No. Mr. Kennedy. No. Mr. Haggerty.
No.
Ms. Lemus.
No.
Mrs. Britt.
No.
Mr. Ricketts.
No.
Mr. Banks.
No.
Mr. Kramer.
No by proxy.
Mr. Moreno.
No by proxy.
Mr. McCormick.
No by proxy.
Ms. Warren.
Yes.
Mr. Reed.
Yes?
Mr. Warner. Yes. Mr. Van Hollen.
Yes, by proxy.
Ms. Cortez Masto.
Yes.
Ms. Smith. Yes. Mr. Warnock. Yes. Mr. Kim.
Yes, by proxy.
Mr. Gallego. Yes. Ms. Bolt Rochester. Yes. Ms. Also Brooks. Yes. Mr. Chairman, the vote is 13 opposed and 11 in favor.
The amendment is not agreed to. Senator Van Hollen has already spoken on his amendment. He would like for us to go straight to the vote.
Can you remind us what this is about before we vote?
Just Amendment 86.
Amendment number 86 is before you. I'd encourage my colleagues to vote no.
Okay, but I just want to know which one it was. Okay.
Well,
He talked about 86.
Or is it 84 and 85?
he talked about 86, not 82.
Or did he talk about 84 and 85?
Well, he's not here, so I'll let him answer for himself, but he's not here, so.
Yeah, but he's also up here.
Oh, yeah. Yes.
We're going to move on to the next amendment. He's on his way, so we'll try to give him a chance to get here. I'll call up Cortez Masto, number 15. Cortez Masto, you are now recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I withdraw the amendment.
Okay. Senator Warren. Senator number 44, you are recognized, Senator Warren.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I've heard from some of my Republican colleagues that we need an America First crypto strategy, but the Genius Act has a giant loophole in it that allows foreign-issued stablecoins to evade this new regulatory framework and yet still be used in the United States. For example, a company would be allowed to issue a stablecoin abroad and then have it offered to customers in the U.S. on U.S. trading platforms, all while evading the safeguards built into this bill. In other words, the bill incentivizes U.S.-based crypto companies to move offshore, and it does nothing to address the risks posed by Tether, the largest stablecoin company in the world, and, according to years of public reporting, a favorite financing vehicle of cartels, terrorist organizations, and sanctions evaders. You know, in a normal world, we would be able to get more than 90 senators to support closing this loophole, to support an America First crypto strategy, or to combat illicit finance, or both. But it seems that my Republican colleagues are worried about facing backlash from one of Donald Trump's close friends and our nation's Commerce Secretary, Howard Lutnick. Lutnick is a cheerleader for Tether, and his 20-something sons are now the co-CEOs of his company, which still owns a 5% interest in Tether. And that is why I am calling for a vote on Warrant 44, which would close this glaring loophole.
Mr. Chairman,
Senator Lummis.
I urge my colleagues to oppose this amendment. This bill is tailored to provide a first-of-its-kind regulatory framework for payment stablecoin issuers. It's not a framework to regulate the secondary market. That topic raises complex policy considerations that we need to discuss in the market structure legislation. We're going from this bill to market structure. We decided to talk about this in a narrow manner, and a number of the things that have been raised will be addressed, but they need to be addressed in market structure. The protections provided in this bill prohibiting non-permitted stablecoin issuers from being used as margin or collateral in clearing and settlement between banking organizations or on the payment infrastructure between banks are tailored to payment stablecoin issuers. Additional restrictions would harm the dominance of the dollar, disrupt existing issuers, cause financial instability, and expand this bill's scope. I want to add one more thing. This bill is probably too restrictive to encourage stablecoin issuer Tether to onshore its business. This is a very restrictive bill when it comes to their business model. So I urge my colleagues not to be looking over their shoulder at someone at a specific company, and I yield back.
The clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Chairman.
Nope.
Mr. Crapo.
Nope.
Mr. Rounds.
No by proxy.
Mr. Tillis.
No.
Mr. Kennedy.
No by proxy.
Mr. Haggerty.
No.
Ms. Lummis.
No.
Mrs. Britt.
No.
Mr. Ricketts.
No.
Mr. Banks.
No.
Mr. Kramer.
No by proxy.
Mr. Moreno.
No.
Mr. McCormick.
No by proxy.
Ms. Warren.
Yes?
Mr. Reed.
Yes?
Mr. Warner. Mr. Van Hollen. Ms. Cortez Masto. Ms. Smith. Mr. Warnock. Mr. Kim.
Yes by proxy?
Mr. Gallego. Ms. Blunt Rochester. Ms. Also Brooks. Mr. Chairman, the vote is 13 opposed, 11 in favor.
The amendment is not agreed to. We will now move back to call up Van Hollen Amendment 86. Senator Van Hollen, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just to refresh everyone's memory, this is a very straightforward provision. It simply adds interest in payment stablecoin issuers to the list of congressional financial disclosures required by members of Congress. I urge its adoption.
Is there a rebuttal?
I'm going to urge my colleagues to oppose this amendment. It's beyond the scope of the bill that we're discussing today. Thank you.
Clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Chairman.
Nope.
Mr. Crapo.
Nope.
Mr. Rounds.
No by proxy.
Mr. Tillis.
Nope.
Mr. Kennedy. Mr. Haggerty. Ms. Lummis. Mrs. Britt.
No.
Mr. Ricketts.
Nope.
Mr. Banks. Mr. Kramer.
No by proxy.
Mr. Moreno. Mr. McCormick.
No by proxy.
Ms. Warren.
Yes?
Mr. Reed.
Yes?
Mr. Warner.
Yes.
Mr. Van Hollen.
I thought this was going to be an easy one. Yes.
Ms. Cortez Masto. Ms. Smith. Mr. Warnock. Mr. Kim.
Yes by proxy.
Mr. Gallego. Ms. Blunt Rochester. Ms. Also Brooks. Mr. Chairman, the vote is 13 opposed, 11 in favor.
Thank you. The amendment is not agreed to. We will now call up Warren Amendment 71. Senator Warren.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to yield some of my time to Senator Van Hollen here. I'm with Senator Van Hollen. I don't understand. This just looked easy to me. This is disclosing our assets. Senator Van Hollen, do you want to say anything on my 2 minutes?
Well, thank you, Senator Warner. I would, because I actually thought this would be an amendment that was adopted by every member here, simply requiring that as part of the annual financial disclosure reports that we all currently filed, and includes stocks and other interests, that we would include interest in payment stablecoin issuers. And I think the fact that, I guess I didn't hear the argument other than it's beyond the scope, but it seems to me it's very, very relevant to trying to build any kind of confidence in stablecoins. And, you know, my view is this bill, as my colleagues have said, includes a very good framework with respect to stablecoins. I have some continuing concerns, especially on the anti-money laundering provisions, and I look forward to going down and reading some of the classified reports. But it seems to me that if we want to inspire any confidence in stablecoins, we should all agree that we should accept an amendment that requires that we disclose any personal interest in stablecoin. That would seem to be a starting point, it seems to me, with respect to transparency. So thank you, Senator Warren. And again, I'm disappointed that that amendment failed.
So let me just say thank you. And let me just say on this amendment, we're supposed to be here to protect sanctions. That's a tool we want to be able to use against bad actors around the world. This bill can be read to say, hey, if you're trying to evade sanctions with dollars, you're in big trouble. But if you use stable coins, you'll be just fine. I don't think that was the intent of the drafters. This is an amendment that just clarifies that the same sanctions rules apply to stablecoins as they do to dollars. I ask people to support this. This one ought to be easy, too.
The clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Chairman.
No?
Mr. Crapo.
No.
Mr. Rounds.
No.
Mr. Tillis.
No.
Mr. Kennedy.
Nope.
Mr. Haggerty.
No.
Ms. Lummis.
No.
Mrs. Britt.
No.
Mr. Ricketts.
Nope.
Mr. Banks.
No.
Mr. Kramer.
No by proxy?
Mr. Moreno.
No.
Mr. McCormick.
No.
Ms. Warren.
Yes.
Mr. Reed. Mr. Warner. Mr. Van Hollen. Ms. Cortez Masto. Ms. Smith. Mr. Warnock. Mr. Kim.
Yes by proxy?
Mr. Gallego. Ms. Blunt Rochester. Ms. Alsobrooks. Mr. Chairman, the vote is 13 opposed and 11 in favor.
The amendment is not agreed to. We will now move to Warren number 49. Senator Warren, you're recognized, ma'am.
Thank you. As every member of this committee knows, community banks are the lifeblood of our economy. They help small businesses get off the ground. They help first-time home buyers finance mortgages. They help small farmers stay afloat, and so much more, all while meeting the unique needs of the communities they serve. Unfortunately, the Genius Act has the potential to devastate community banks all around this country. Deposits could flow out of community banks into the stablecoin market, leaving fewer funds available for lending to small businesses and households, especially in rural communities where credit is increasingly scarce. This could have a drastic impact on community banks' ability to lend to small businesses, to serve our towns, to meet local needs. And that's why I'm calling for a vote on Warren 49. This amendment would require the Treasury Department to assess the impact of the Genius Act on community banks' ability to serve households and small businesses. If the Treasury Department finds after 5 years that the Genius Act has had a negative impact, the act will sunset and stablecoin issuers will be required to redeem their coins. All we're asking for here is a study to find out what happens to our community banks. We stand up over and over and over and talk about how important they are to us. Then let's just put our money where our mouth is, say, let's keep track of what happens after 5 years in this new stablecoin regime and make sure our community banks are fully protected. I ask for a yes on this.
Mr. Chairman.
Senator Haggerty.
The Genius Act already includes an annual reporting requirement on the potential financial stability risks that are posed to the safety and soundness of the broader financial system by payment stablecoin activities. This reporting would include any impacts on the banking sector, and that includes community banks. We recognize the important role that community banks play in our community, but creating a sunset provision for this legislation makes the entire bill unworkable, and it doesn't provide clarity to the stablecoin industry. So I'm going to urge my colleagues to oppose this amendment. Thank
Clerk will call the roll. No.
Mr. Crapo.
No by proxy.
Mr. Rounds. No. Mr. Tillis. No. Mr. Kennedy. No. Mr. Haggerty.
No.
Ms. Lummis. No. Mrs. Britt.
No.
Mr. Ricketts.
No.
Mr. Banks.
No.
Mr. Kramer. No. Mr. Moreno.
No.
Mr. McCormick.
No.
Ms. Warren.
Yes.
Mr. Reed. Mr. Warner. Mr. Van Hollen.
Yes by proxy.
Ms. Cortez Masto. Ms. Smith. Mr. Warnock. Mr. Kim.
Yes by proxy.
Mr. Gallego. Ms. Blunt Rochester. Ms. Alsobrooks. Mr. Chairman, the vote is 13 opposed and 11 in favor.
The amendment is not agreed to. We will call up Warren number 69. Senator Warren, you're recognized.
Thank you very much, Mr. Oops, here we go. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Most crypto transactions are publicly preserved on the blockchain, so there's an opportunity to monitor the flows of money for malicious activity if it isn't obscured by mixers and tumblers. It's important that stablecoin issuers have the ability to freeze and burn stablecoins once law enforcement identifies unlawful conduct. But too often, that after-the-fact approach leaves our authorities scrambled. This committee can and should help law enforcement get the information they need as quickly as possible. This amendment would help make that fix by requiring issuers to monitor their blockchains and report suspicious activity to law enforcement the way every other responsible bank and financial institution already does. Otherwise, these issuers can just turn a blind eye to the criminal financing that's right there in plain view, whether it's moving money to drug traffickers or funding child pornographers or moving money to Iran. I urge the committee to give a yes vote to this amendment.
Senator Haggerty, you're recognized.
Thank you. Requiring issuers to monitor transactions on various blockchains would be costly, it'd be time-consuming. Under the Genius Act, stablecoin issuers must already comply with the Bank Secrecy Act, including filing suspicious activity reports and cooperating with law enforcement. Therefore, I'm going to urge my colleagues to oppose this amendment. Thank you.
Clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Chairman.
No.
Mr. Crapo.
No by proxy.
Mr. Rounds.
No.
Mr. Tillis.
No.
Mr. Kennedy. Mr. Haggerty.
No.
Ms. Lummis.
No.
Mrs. Britt.
No by proxy.
Mr. Ricketts.
No.
Mr. Banks.
No.
Mr. Kramer. Mr. Moreno.
No.
Mr. McCormick.
No.
Ms. Warren.
Yes.
Mr. Reed. Mr. Warner. Mr. Van Hollen.
Yes by proxy.
Ms. Cortez Masto. Ms. Smith. Mr. Warnock. Mr. Kim.
Yes by proxy.
Mr. Gallego.
Yes by proxy.
Ms. Blunt Rochester. Ms. Alsobrooks. Mr. Chairman, the vote is 13 opposed, 11 in favor.
The amendment is not agreed to. We will now call up, I believe it is our last amendment, which is amendment number 52 by Senator Warren. You are now recognized.
Okay. So the last amendment I'm going to offer here today addresses the fact that this bill lacks the basic safeguards to make sure that stablecoins don't blow up our entire economy. Under this bill, regulators are severely constrained in their ability to apply capital and liquidity safeguards to stablecoin issues, increasing the likelihood that stablecoin issuers experience debilitating runs, sell off assets at fire sale prices, and destabilize our financial system. The bill uses language designed to prevent regulators from applying meaningful safeguards to stablecoin issuers, instead, quite frankly, just letting them run wild. The last time this committee came together to deregulate a key part of the financial system was 2018. Large regional banks, it blew up just 5 years later in the spring of 2023 when we saw the second, third, and fourth largest bank failures in U.S. history. At some point, we need to stop making the same mistakes over and over again. Warren 52 would reduce these risks. Specifically, it would restore regulators' ability to apply capital, liquidity, and other risk management safeguards to stablecoin issuers. And I just have to say, as we wrap this up, it would be crazy to advance this bill when it's got so many holes in it that have been pointed out, and to advance it at the exact moment that news is breaking about Donald Trump trying to create his own stable coin with an outfit that is notorious for breaking the law. This makes no sense for us to do this. No one here is saying we can't do stablecoin legislation, but we have pointed out through amendment after amendment after amendment, places where we just need to close up some loopholes or add a little more muscle for the regulators, places where we are told by the Republican sponsors, oh, we fixed that. Well, if you fixed it, then why not adopt some of these amendments that say for certain and for sure this problem has been fixed? Instead, jamming this through while Donald Trump is out there making a deal with a criminal stablecoin platform makes no sense at all, and we will regret this.
Let me just say real quick that the Genius Act has capital, liquidity, and risk management requirements. This amendment actually makes the capital, liquidity, and risk management requirements weaker by eliminating the reserve asset diversification requirement. The primary federal payment stablecoin regulators are given discretion when applying these standards, which allow for tailoring. Granting regulators tailoring flexibility will help ensure that regulations are workable for payment stablecoin issuers. I urge my colleagues to vote no. The clerk will call the vote.
Mr. Chair? Mr. Chair? I would request recognition for about 90 seconds before the vote.
I'll give you 1 minute. Well, before the final passage? Yeah, okay.
Yeah, thank you.
Sounds good. You want to speak on this? Okay. All right, let's, clerk will call the roll on this amendment.
Mr. Chairman.
No.
Mr. Crapo.
Nope.
Mr. Rounds.
No.
Mr. Tillis.
No.
Mr. Kennedy. Mr. Haggerty.
No.
Ms. Lemus.
No.
Mrs. Britt.
No.
Mr. Ricketts.
Nope.
Mr. Banks. Mr. Kramer. Mr. Moreno.
No.
Mr. McCormick.
No.
Ms. Warren.
Yes.
Mr. Reed. Mr. Warner. Mr. Van Hollen. Ms. Cortez Masto. Ms. Smith. Mr. Warnock. Mr. Kim.
Yes, by proxy.
Mr. Gallego. Ms. Blunt Rochester. Ms. Salsa Brooks. Mr. Chairman, the vote is 13 opposed and 11 in favor.
The amendment is not agreed to. We will now move to the conclusion of this legislation. Then we have one more, which will not take nearly as long. Good news. I will recognize Senator Warnock and Warner, as well as Senator Haggerty, for comments around 1 minute, please.
Thank you, Chair Scott. Cryptocurrency and digital assets are here to stay, and it is important that we keep technological superiority and innovation right here in America. And that is why I had hoped to support this bill today. While I appreciate the considerable improvements that have been made to the bill, more work remains to protect consumers and to protect the financial system. This bill needs stronger consumer protections. It must tighten up restrictions related to national security and unregistered foreign stablecoin issuers from doing business here in America, and it must do more to keep big tech and big business from undermining our financial system. So today I am going to vote no on this legislation, but I hope this bill improves enough that I can support it on the floor, because I believe we need a rational regulatory structure around stablecoin, and I stand ready to work with my colleagues in a bipartisan way to get that done. Thank you very much, Mr.
Senator Warner?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would not have supported this bill before the manager's amendment. But there have been a lot of mischaracterizations today. In the amendment, we dramatically increased BSA, AML. We actually made it easier to seize and freeze. We put criminal penalties in place. We've done a lot on foreign issuers. There's 30-odd changes that were made in the manager's amendment, and many of us were involved in that. I actually think a strong bipartisan amendment, and I'm going to be supporting the legislation, coming out of this, frankly, strengthens our hand as we move to the floor where we need. I know Senator Hagerty, Senator Lummis, or others have said they'll work with us. And I tell you, this one is easy compared to market structure. Mixers, exchanges, this is much more gnarly. This was a bill that was, for the most part, drafted with out a lot of our input. On the next issue, I think we can start with much more bipartisan input. I think we do that by sending a strong bipartisan aye vote out of this committee.
Mr. Chairman, I will be very brief. I think a lot of improvement was made to this bill during the amendment process, the manager's amendment process, and I want to commend everybody involved with that. I still have serious concerns that were addressed by some of the amendments that were not adopted, and I do look forward to going down to the classified room to read all sides with respect to the use of stable coins in illicit activities, which remains my biggest concern at this point, given the changes that have been made. So I'm going to be voting no, but I look forward to working with my colleagues to see if we can address some of the concerns that I still have.
Mr. Chairman, we're here today to advance a first-of-its-kind regulatory framework that advances the standing of the U.S. dollar. It protects consumers and it protects our national security. This bill is critical for digital asset and payments innovation, and America must lead around the globe. I also want to point out that this bill, and the manager's amendment in particular, are the product of significant bipartisan negotiations. Senator Warner, I think you set the stage very well. This is the beginning of a conversation that's going to continue. And many of the issues and amendments that are brought up today, I think, will fit well into further conversations about market structure. But the critical element today is that we have worked extraordinarily hard. I mean, you just asked the staffs of Senators Warner, Gallego, also Brooks, Senator Gillibrand. All of those staffs have worked their hearts out along with us, and I very much appreciate the effort that's gone into it, and I very much look forward to taking this major step in the direction of supporting a critical technology and critical innovation here in America. Thank you.
I'll just say that while I appreciate the hard work and frankly the debate, maybe the 38 people watching us on C-SPAN are not used to seeing the sausage-making process. It's not nearly as attractive as it sounds like when you're just talking about it. When you're talking about it, it does sound very attractive to me. However, I will say that this is an open process, and that's the beauty of the United States Senate, and frankly, the Senate Banking Committee returning to that regular order is frankly an accomplishment. This legislation, the Genius Act that I'm a co-sponsor of, is a leap in the right direction. We have an opportunity to work in bipartisan fashion. I think we've done that on behalf of the American people. I want to thank my staff. My staff has had to coordinate and work with staff all across this dais, and they've done a fabulous job making sure that your staff was heard, that your voices were heard. While we will not always agree on the final product, this is an opportunity for us to move forward. I look forward to having a robust conversation on market structure, which will be much easier than this process, not harder.
I have a question, Mr. Chairman.
Well, I will not recognize you at this point, but I do think it's important for us to recognize the hard work and dedication that's been put into this, and I will entertain your question before I go to the final vote.
Thank you. And it's just in reference to what you just said. I'd like to know if somebody's working on the market structure bill, who that is, so that I could engage with them on some of the issues that you just talked about that we need to put in there.
Well, I'll have my team reach out. We're working on it as well, but I would love to have a conversation with anyone who's interested in that conversation. Let us start that conversation immediately when we return from next week.
Thank you.
Love to have your input. Now, the final question on this bill, before we move to the FIRM Act, please remember we have one more to do, which will be much faster. Senate Bill number 919, the Genius Act, co-sponsored by Senators Hagerty, Lummis, Scott, also Brooks, and Gillibrand, reported as amendment. The clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
Mr. Crapo.
Yes.
Mr. Rounds.
Aye.
Mr. Tillis.
Aye.
Mr. Kennedy. Mr. Hagerty.
Aye.
Ms. Lummis.
Aye.
Mrs. Britt.
Aye.
Mr. Ricketts.
Aye.
Mr. Banks. Mr. Kramer. Mr. Moreno.
Aye.
Mr. McCormick.
Aye.
Ms. Warren.
No.
Mr. Reed. Mr. Warner. Mr. Van Hollen. Ms. Cortez Masto. Ms. Smith. Mr. Warnock. Mr. Kim.
Aye by proxy.
Mr. Gallego. Ms. Blunt Rochester. Ms. Also Brooks.
I record you as you're about to say. Okay, good. I like that better than no. That's great.
Voting aye. Okay. Ms. Also Brooks. Mr. Chairman, the vote is 18 in favor, 6 opposed.
The ayes have it. Senate Bill 919 is hereby ordered reported as amended to the full Senate. I ask unanimous consent that staff be allowed to make technical and conforming changes and that the cordon rule be waived. Any objection? Hearing no objection, so ordered. I now move to call up S 875, the Firm Act. I ask unanimous consent that we dispense with the reading of all amendments. Senators will find printed copies of those amendments, the text before you. Is there any objection? Without objection, so ordered. I move to the consideration of the manager's package, Scott's Amendment 16. This amendment includes Rounds Amendment 18, which adds the Taylor Act, a bill to require federal regulators to right-size regulations for community banks. I urge all my colleagues to support this amendment. Would anyone like to speak on the amendment? Senator Rounds.
Mr. Chairman, and I will be very quick. I'd like to thank you for including my bill, the Taylor Act, in the manager's amendment. During the previous administration, financial institutions across South Dakota were negatively impacted by burdensome, unnecessary regulations due to disproportionate compliance costs, with consumers ultimately paying the price. The Taylor Act mandates that federal financial regulators consider individual financial institutions' risk profiles when formulating regulations. It also requires these agencies to submit an annual report to Congress detailing regulatory adjustments and bank supervision modernization efforts. I want to thank the co-sponsors of the bill, Senators Kramer, Daines, Hagerty, Loomis, and Tillis. Paired with the Firm Act, this is just plain common sense to get our financial regulators refocused on their statutory mandate, safety and soundness. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thanks, sir. Is there any further discussion? Without it, I'll ask for a voice vote. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
No.
The ayes have it. We will now move to read Amendment number 10.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. And my amendment strikes this bill and replaces it with Section 10 of the Safer Banking Act, which this committee favorably reported last Congress on a bipartisan 14-9 vote. The Bipartisan Safer Banking Act and this amendment would prohibit the banking agencies from debanking people unless the agencies have a, quote, valid reason to do so. It would place guardrails around the regulators' use of reputational risk without eliminating the concept entirely. It would codify policies adopted by the banking regulators in 2018 when Donald Trump was president and Republicans were in charge of both houses. In contrast, this bill completely writes reputational risk out of the supervision, regulation, and enforcement. That sends a message that bank supervisors should not be raising red flags for a big category of risky activity. And I believe that's a mistake because reputational risk is financial risk. Just look at the 2008 subprime crisis. Customers, creditors, and the market lost confidence in banks for underwriting mortgages that people couldn't afford and then misleading investors about the risk of complex securities tied to those mortgages. This amendment prevents debanking in a responsible way. I would ask for the yeas and nays and request a yea vote.
I'll urge my colleagues to oppose this amendment. Section 10 of the Safer Banking Act was carefully crafted in an attempt to banking, and I commend those who drafted it. The Firm Act is a cleaner approach that strikes at the core of the issue by eliminating reputational risk altogether. We have seen regulators over and over use it in broad interpretive ways that compromises their authority from our perspective. I urge my colleagues to vote no. The clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Chairman.
No.
Mr. Crapo.
Nope.
Mr. Rounds.
No.
Mr. Tillis.
No.
Mr. Kennedy. Mr. Hagerty.
No by proxy?
Ms. Lummis.
No.
Mrs. Britt.
No.
Mr. Ricketts.
Nope.
Mr. Banks.
No.
Mr. Kramer.
No by proxy?
Mr. Moreno.
No by proxy?
Mr. McCormick.
No by proxy?
Ms. Warren.
Yes.
Mr. Reed.
Yes?
Mr. Warner.
Yes by proxy.
Mr. Van Hollen,
Yes, by proxy.
Ms. Cortez Masto, Ms. Smith, Mr. Warnock,
Yes, by proxy.
Mr. Kim,
Yes, by proxy.
Mr. Gallego,
Yes, by proxy.
Ms. Blunt Rochester,
Yes, by proxy.
Ms. Also Brooks.
Yes, by proxy.
Mr. Chairman, the vote is 13 opposed and 11 in favor.
The amendment is not agreed to. We'll call up Reed Amendment number 13. Senator Reed, you are recognized, sir.
I believe it's 11.
11? Even better.
Yes.
11.
My amendment would help ensure that the banking agencies will continue to have all the authority that they need to root out bad actors from our banking system. Banks routinely apply reputational risk policies and procedures to make sure that they're not doing business with dangerous individuals or groups whose activities could threaten the bank. This includes individuals and organizations linked to terrorist groups like Hamas, drug cartels like MS-13, and enemies or adversaries, at least, like Iran. We've seen what happens when banks discount reputational risk when they ignore it. For example, 2 large banks decided it was within their risk tolerance to do business with Jeffrey Epstein after his first conviction for soliciting child prostitution. Overlooking that bright red flag facilitated additional crimes and resulted in the banks paying $365 million in settlements. Unfortunately, the prohibitions in this bill are so overbroad that the regulators will find it harder to hold banks accountable for this kind of behavior. I think there needs to be a clear distinction to allow the consideration of reputational risk when a bank overlooks chronic criminal behavior, like sex trafficking of a minor, because simply the client is very wealthy or lucrative and they're making money. My amendment will preserve this tool in these and many other circumstances. I would ask for the yeas and nays. Thank you.
Thanks, Senator Reed. I urge my colleagues to oppose this amendment. While I appreciate the spirit of this amendment, each of the activities listed are already crimes, and it would be illegal for a bank to engage in any conduct with these criminals. We have very explicit anti-money laundering and Bank Secrecy Act laws that prevent banks from doing business with any sanctioned nation, person, and identified affiliates, in addition to preventing them from doing any other illicit business. The Firm Act does not in any way curtail regulators or law enforcement's ability to supervise for or penalize banks from doing business with criminals. The clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Chairman.
No.
Mr. Crapo.
Nope.
Mr. Rounds.
No.
Mr. Tillis.
No.
Mr. Kennedy.
No.
Mr. Haggerty.
No by proxy.
Ms. Lemus.
No.
Mrs. Britt.
No.
Mr. Ricketts.
No.
Mr. Banks.
No by,
Mr. Kramer.
no by proxy.
Mr. Moreno.
No.
Mr. McCormick.
No.
Ms. Warren.
Yes.
Mr. Reed. Mr. Warner.
Yes, by proxy.
Mr. Van Hollen.
Yes, by proxy.
Ms. Cortez Masto. Ms. Smith. Mr. Warnock.
Yes, by proxy.
Mr. Kim.
Yes, by proxy.
Mr. Gallego.
Yes, by proxy.
Ms. Blunt Rochester.
Yes, by proxy.
Ms. Also Brooks.
Yes, by proxy.
Mr. Chairman, the vote is 13 opposed, 11 in favor.
The amendment is not agreed to. We'll move and call up Cortez Masto, Amendment number 5. Senator Cortez Masto, you're
Thank you,
recognized,
Mr.
ma'am.
Chairman.
Yes, ma'am.
Appreciate that. This amendment creates an exception to the prohibition against bank examiners considering reputational risk for any financial institution. My amendment adds a new section, Section 6, now Section 7 in the manager's amendment, exempting bank regulators from that prohibition when banks are serving foreign governments hostile to the United States. My amendment basically allows bank regulators to continue their current practice of considering all risks. My amendment permits bank examiners to consider reputational risk for banks doing business with the governments and leaders of countries adversarial to our nation. The amendment lists China, Russia, Iran, North Korea, and includes others determined to be adversarial to the United States. Bank examiners should still consider reputational risk for banks that serve the leaders of China, Russia, and other hostile powers. Remember the Riggs Bank scandal years ago. Riggs Bank went to great lengths to help former Chilean dictator Pinochet hide his stolen wealth. That money laundering scandal closed Riggs Bank, the largest bank then in Washington, D.C. Bill we are considering today prohibits bank examiners from considering reputational risk to any bank or credit union for any reason. Instead, bank regulators should consider the damage which may occur if a bank does business with dictators or their families, or bank regulators should consider the negative impacts to a bank that provides services to state sponsors of terrorism. That's just common sense, and I urge my colleagues to support me.
I'll appreciate the sentiment of my colleague. I will encourage my colleagues to vote no. Adversarial nation states such as North Korea and Iran are subject to sanctions preventing banks from conducting business with them. It would be inappropriate for the Congress to grant financial regulators the authority to conduct foreign relations activity through the supervision of banks. The FIRM Act seeks to prevent banking regulators from abusing their authority to pick winners and losers. The bill does not discuss any one group, individual, or political ideology. It simply prevents regulators from picking and choosing. The clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Chairman.
Nope.
Mr. Crapo.
Nope.
Mr. Rounds.
No.
Mr. Tillis.
Nope.
Mr. Kennedy. No. Mr. Haggerty.
No by proxy?
Ms. Lummis.
No.
Mrs. Britt.
No.
Mr. Ricketts.
No.
Mr. Banks.
No.
Mr. Kramer. No. Mr. Moreno.
No.
Mr. McCormick. No. Ms. Warren.
Yes.
Mr. Reed.
Yes by proxy.
Mr. Warner.
Yes by proxy.
Mr. Van Hollen.
Yes by proxy.
Ms. Cortez Masto. Oh, sorry. Ms. Smith.
Yes.
Mr. Warnock.
Yes by proxy.
Mr. Kim.
Yes by proxy.
Mr. Gallego.
Yes by proxy.
Ms. Blunt Rochester.
Yes by proxy.
Ms. Also Brooks.
Yes by proxy.
Mr. Chairman, the vote is 13 opposed and 11 in favor.
The amendment is not agreed to. I'll call up Cortez Masto, amendment number 6. Senator Cortez Masto, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I withdraw amendment number 6.
Thank you, ma'am. We'll call up your next amendment, ma'am, number 9.
Thank you. So this amendment adds language to Section 7, which requires a report to Congress, and it's simple. The amendment would add to that report a requirement for regulators to list the names of all financial institutions which have more than half their net income from overdraft and/or non-sufficient funds fees. As part of that report, regulators should analyze and inform the public which banks and credit unions generate more than half their profits from overdraft or non-sufficient fund fees. At our hearing on debanking, we heard from witnesses who urged Congress and banking regulators to scrutinize banks where overdraft fees account for more than half of their profits. My amendment urges regulators to examine and report institutions whose main business is overdraft fees, and I request support for this amendment.
Thank you, ma'am. I encourage my colleagues to oppose this amendment. The FIRM Act is a narrowly crafted bill dealing with bank supervision and abuse by bank regulators. The bill has nothing to do with any form of bank activities or revenue streams. It would be inappropriate to include a study on any form of bank activity in this bill. The clerk will call the roll.
Actually, excuse me, Mr. Chair, it's not a study. It's a report, adding to the report that's already required in the bill. Just a clarification.
Yes, great. From report to what she said. Clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Chairman.
No.
Mr. Crapo.
No.
Mr. Rounds.
No.
Mr. Tillis. Mr. Kennedy. Mr. Haggerty.
No by proxy?
Ms. Lummis.
No.
Mrs. Britt.
No.
Mr. Ricketts.
No.
Mr. Banks. Mr. Kramer. Mr. Moreno.
No.
Mr. McCormick. Ms. Warren.
Yes.
Mr. Reed.
Yes by proxy.
Mr. Warner.
Yes by proxy.
Mr. Van Hollen.
Yes by proxy.
Ms. Cortez Masto.
Yes.
Ms. Smith.
Yes.
Mr. Warnock.
Yes by proxy.
Mr. Kim.
Yes by proxy.
Mr. Gallego.
Yes by proxy.
Ms. Blunt Rochester.
Yes by proxy.
Ms. Also Brooks.
Yes by proxy.
Mr. Chairman, the vote is 13 opposed and 11 in favor.
The amendment is not agreed to. With no further amendments, the question is now on ordering the bill, Senate Bill 875, the FIRM Act, reported as amended. The clerk will call the roll. Oh, yeah, we do. Yep, there he is. The clerk will call the roll.
Yep. Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
Mr. Crapo.
Aye.
Mr. Rounds.
Aye.
Mr. Tillis.
Aye.
Mr. Kennedy. Mr. Haggerty.
Yes by proxy.
Ms. Lummis. Mrs. Britt.
Aye.
Mr. Ricketts.
Aye.
Mr. Banks. Mr. Kramer. Mr. Moreno.
Aye.
Mr. McCormick. Ms. Warren.
No.
Mr. Reed.
No by proxy.
Mr. Warner.
No by proxy.
Mr. Van Hollen.
No by proxy.
Ms. Cortez Masto.
No.
Ms. Smith. No. Mr. Warnock.
No by proxy.
Mr. Kim.
No by proxy.
Mr. Gallego.
No by proxy.
Ms. Blunt Rochester.
No by proxy.
And Ms. Alsobrooks.
No by proxy.
Mr. Chairman, the vote is 13 in favor, 11 opposed.
Thank you. The ayes have it. Senate Bill 875 is hereby ordered, reported as amended to the full Senate. I ask unanimous consent that staff be allowed to make technical and conforming changes and that the cordon rule be waived. Any objection? Hearing no objection, so ordered. Without any further statements, the executive session is now adjourned.
Well done.
Thank you.
On procedure.
Right.